Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the Luffy fanfics, back with the amazing fanfiction. This is the second part of What if Luffy gather fearsome crew with different devil fruit. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. It was a scene that was the basis of so many nightmares for Nami as she watched the people of her village pick up rusty pitchforks and pieces of timber and proceed to march towards Arlong Park, to their death, after all the years she spent under the thumb of the man who murdered her mother in an attempt to free her friends and her family. She lied, cheated, and stole from so many people to complete her self-appointed mission. But it seems that for all the world she experienced in her travels, she was still far too naive. She had finally gathered the 100 million bully that she needed to free Kakuyashi village from Arlong's grasp. He had promised her that if she gathered that amount, she could buy back her village. She sailed back to her village with hope blossoming in her chest for the first time in 10 years. She had finally done it, but it seems that she was only fooling herself. After only having been back on the island for a few hours, she was accosted by the Marines, led by Captain Nezumi of the 16th branch. She immediately knew something was terribly wrong. They accused her of being a thief, along with other petty crimes that weren't even worth mentioning compared to the injustice occurring in their island at the hands of Arlong. When the citizens pointed this out to him loudly, he just had a smug smile on his face. As a result, the 100 million that Nami had gathered was confiscated, but not before Nezumi accidentally letting slip that he knew the exact amount she had beforehand. Nami knew that Arlong was behind this. There was no other way for Nezumi to have known. It also explained why there was never any help afforded to them by the Marines. Arlong had a Marine captain in his back pocket. Nami was absolutely heartbroken at what had happened, but she tried to keep a smile on her face for the villagers. She said that she would gather the money again and eventually buy back the village. But the villagers decided that enough was enough. They picked up their makeshift weapons and marched towards Arlong Park to avenge the atrocities that were committed against them as well as the abuse suffered by Nami at the hands of that monster. Nami ran in front of them and begged them to stop, but none of them listened. Her sister, Nijiko, told her that the people had reached their breaking point and nothing could stop them now, despite the fact they knew they were marching to their deaths. She could do nothing but watch on, with tears streaming down her face as Genzo, the town mayor and a man she looked up to as a father figure, stared down Arlong and declared their intentions of resistance. If anything, Arlong simply looked amused at their efforts. He took a perverse delight in the suffering he was inflicting on Nami. He allowed Genzo to give a rousing speech about how they were going to be rid of him today. Not that Arlong paid much attention. Shahaha ... You inferior human filth, have some nerve, raising your weapons to your betters after all the care that we have given you. Arlong mocked, infuriating the villagers further. It ends today, Arlong, one way or another, Genzo shouted, getting cheers of approval from the people. Please stop. There's no need to do this. I can gather more money. Nami tried one last time, but her argument fell on deaf ears. I'm sorry, Nami. We've watched for 10 years as you've endured the pain and loneliness, just so that you could free us. But we will end your suffering today, Genzo proclaimed, getting even more shouts of approval from his fellow villagers. Name couldn't stop the tears, from sadness, grief, despair, and a little happiness at the end. She saw the resolve on the faces of the villagers, and she knew that nothing she said could change their minds. She pulled herself together, assembled her staff, and stood by the villagers ready to fight with them. Such insolence. I see you finally lost your mind, Nami. Not that I'm surprised. It looks like I have to teach you weaklings a lesson once again about the superiority of the fishman race. Kill them, boys, but make it as slow and painful as possible. But leave Nami for last. I want her to watch as all those she loves are brutalized. Shahaha, Arlong ordered cruelly. The bloodthirsty smirks on the faces of the surrounding fishmen immediately put the villagers on edge. This wasn't how they planned on things happening. They were honestly terrified of the scenario that Arlong outlined. They weren't afraid of dying, but the thought of Nami being forced to watch them suffer made them hesitate. It happened just as the fishmen were about to attack. It was a sound, a strange sound, one that was totally out of place in the tense atmosphere of Arlong Park, which was why it stood out so much as to grab their attention. All action stopped in Arlong Park as the inhabitants strained their ears to pick up the source of the sound. After a few seconds, it became clearer. It was the sound of someone humming. More precisely, it was the sound of someone humming a silly tune. They got their answer, though, as the source of the humming came sailing into the park. It was a medium-sized boat, with not much to distinguish it from others of its kind, with the exception of the menacing-looking Jolly Roger painted on the black sail. It was a more narrow and angular skull compared to the standard. It had sharp, narrow eyes, with a large jagged set of teeth. It was pure white on top of what looked like a red moon with blue arcs of electricity painted around it. And, divided by for a visual, think of Ichigo's hollow mask without any of the markings for the skull. The flag is inspired by the Japanese flag, but with the base being black and the red circle painted to look like a moon with the skull and crossbones on top of it. Divided by all in all, it was extremely intimidating. What was less intimidating, though, was the young man in black, standing at the front of the ship, with his arms crossed, his long black hair and coat flapping dramatically in the wind and his intense purple eyes piercing the space in front of him. He was flanked by 4 extremely beautiful and dangerous-looking women. It would have been an awe-inspiring sight, if it weren't for the fact that he seemed to be humming his own theme music. Pananana na 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 pananana. 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 Every occupant in Arlong Park stopped what they were doing to stare at the sheer ridiculousness that they were witnessing. There were sweat drops and deadpan stares directed at the entrance of these obviously mentally challenged people. Bisca looked a little embarrassed, if the tinges of pink on her cheeks and her shifty eyes were anything to go by. Ryuju's expression was as cold as ice as she stared down the Arlong pirates. She completely disregarded everyone's presence and just stood regally next to her captain, seemingly unbothered by his antics. She was focused and ready to act on his orders. Shizuku, as always, was completely immovable in her expression and oblivious to the situation. Whether it was that she didn't care about being embarrassed, or that she didn't realize that her captain was actually doing something embarrassing, Bisca would never know. Kuina, on the other hand, looked like she was pumped up. Her foot was tapping along with the tune her captain was humming, and she looked to be really getting into it, if the sharpness of her posture and the intensity of her eyes were anything to go by. Bisca just looked at her with a deadpan stare, realizing that she was a lost cause from the very beginning. As the boat came to a stop in the bay of Arlong Park, Luffy's humming stopped and his intense gaze swept across the scene. Suddenly the tension rose dramatically. Luffy looked far more dangerous now that he stopped humming, and the villagers and even some of the fishermen gulped audibly at the dangerous vibes he was giving off. Nami was shocked. She immediately recognized Luffy and Kuina from Orange Town. They were the two that effortlessly destroyed Buggy the Clown and his crew. As Luffy's gaze continued to scan the area, the occupants waited with bated breath for what he would say. Such was the commanding nature of his presence. As he opened his mouth, they led it forward in anticipation. "Which one of you is Alfred?" Luffy thundered. People face planted at how anticlimactic his question turned out to be. Even Arlong had to sweat drop at the stupidity he was seeing. Bisca face palmed hard at her captain's antics. Shockingly, though, a middle-aged man timidly stepped forward from the crowd and shakily raised his hand. I'm Alfred sir the man stuttered out, with whole body trembling in fear. Luffy's sharp gaze immediately zeroed in on the man, and Kuina slowly started to unsheath her katana, causing him to tremble even more. The poor man looked like he was about to have a nervous breakdown. Tears and snot were started streaming down his face, and a wet spot could be seen appearing on his pants as Luffy's ill intent was directed at him. "Well, you certainly are one ugly motherfucker. Just what I'd expect from a notorious fishman with a reputation as disreputable as yours. I find it hard to believe, though, that the Marines put a 20 million bully bounty on a flaky character such as you." Luffy drawled out. Realization set for the villagers as they figured out who he was really talking about. They didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or be fearful. This strange man completely dissolved any tension they may have been feeling with his ridiculous action. "Boss, it not Alfred. It Arlong. The Arlong. And he's a fishman. He the one sitting on the chair over there," Bisca pointed out exhaustedly. Luffy perked up at that and hit his palm with his fist in comprehension. He turned to the poor guy he had frightened. "Tashigi, sorry about that, Alfred. That was my bad." He apologized insincerely. Poor Alfred just sobbed in relief at not being the focus of Luffy's attention anymore. "Shahaha ... so some puny human thinks he can just barge into my home. Who are you, weakling? A bounty hunter, perhaps? Or did you come here to bow to the might of the fishman race?" Arlong challenged arrogantly with his arms outstretched. Luffy, on the other hand, just looked at him in pity. Something that Arlong seemed to pick up on as it infuriated him at some no-name weakling looking down on him. First of, I'm not a bounty hunter, as any person with half a brain cell could distinguish from the Jolly Roger on my sails, Luffy said slowly, taking care to pronounce each word, like he was speaking to a particularly dim-witted child. Second, as stated, I'm a pirate. Rules about property and crap like that don't really apply to me. If that easy enough for you understand, or do you need me to draw a picture for you to comprehend it? My navigator, Shizuku, is quite a talented artist. I'm sure she can whip you up a picture book if you're stuck. Luffy finished, with Shizuku pulling out her sketchbook and art supplies. The rest of his girls didn't even bother to hold back their giggles at his remarks. The villagers looked on in shock at the audacity of the newcomer. Never in their wildest dreams did they imagine someone having the gall to speak to Arlong in such a way. Speaking of the resident dictator, he had a vein on his temple that was throbbing violently at the nerve of what he perceived as an inferior human. "Before I beat the superiority of the fishman race into your thick skull, tell me your name, trash." Arlong said menacingly. Luffy just raised an eyebrow at him. Normally I wouldn't bother giving my name to every piece of cannon fodder I come across, but I'm feeling particularly generous today. My name is Monkey D. Luffy, the man who will be Pirate King. Remember that fish face? Luffy answered with a smirk that infuriated Arlong. He didn't get time to dwell on that though. Shizuku, Luffy called out, said woman immediately stepping forward. Since you got to take out Ding Kong the last time, I think it's only fair that the others get to have a chance for a good fight. He seems to have 3 other officers around him. Leave those to the others. For now though, take out the rest of the trash, Luffy ordered with a stony look on his face, his demeanor doing a complete 180 from his previous playful personality. Yes, master. Shizuku nodded in obedience before exploding into action. She leapt off the boat and landed right in the middle of the grunts of the Arlong pirates. She wasted no time in unleashing her devastating fists on the unsuspecting fishmen. So used to their dominance over the weak villagers, they were wholly unprepared for the pure power she unleashed upon them. She swiftly dodged under sloppy punches and lazy kicks from the grunts, who were clearly untrained and spent far too many years sitting on their asses to even pose a fraction of a challenge to the inhuman nature of Shizuku. She dispatched them with the ease one would show when stomping ants. Solid punches sent fishmen flying in all directions, bones breaking like twigs under the force of her blows. Try as they might, they didn't stand a chance in hell against her now that she was carrying out her captain's orders. The villagers looked on in shock and awe, disbelief painted clearly on their faces as they watched a single woman dispatch the majority of the Arlong pirates like they were cannon fodder, which to her, they were. An unfamiliar feeling blossomed in the hearts of the villagers as they watched the carnage. The feeling called hope. Arlong clutched his armrest tightly, causing it to crumble under his strength. He was enraged by the scene he was witnessing. His brothers were being swatted like flies, and by a single woman at that. He could barely control his temper. It took no more than 3 minutes for Shizuku to completely eradicate the grunts of the Arlong pirates, and she did so with alarming ease. Bodies were strewn all over the park. Broken bodies, bleeding bodies. Even the villagers had to cringe at the brutality that were inflicted upon the fishmen by this single woman. Said woman just robotically turned back and made her way to her captain. Mission accomplished, master, she intoned. Luffy just smiled at her proudly and patted her head once again, causing her to seemingly revel in his attention. If the triumphant glint in her eyes directed at her fellow female crewmates were any indication, the 3 of them didn't respond to her provocative actions, but they did twitch in annoyance at her actions. Unforgivable. For you inferior humans to come here and do this. I will kill you all. Arlong roared. Arlong, take it easy, Chew. We will handle it from here, Chew. There's no need to get your hand dirty with these weakling, Chew. A fishman with strangely big lips said as he stepped forward, followed by a large-framed fishman with weird elbows and one with 6 arms. They appeared to be the officers of the Arlong pirates. Another weirdo appears. Luffy commented. I don't want to hear that from someone like you, Chew. The big-lipped fishman retorted. Well, there are 3 moderately strong opponents before us. Please note the biting sarcasm in my voice. Luffy drawled out with half-lidded eyes, causing tick marks to appear of the foreheads of the mentioned 3. Hyuna, you take the octopus. Ray, the Bruce Lee wannabe with the messed-up elbows is yours. Bisca, you take out the weirdo with the suspiciously pouty lips. I don't really want to know what he does with those lips of his, Luffy ordered, before whispering the last part loudly for all to hear. The red face on the lip guy made a few guys shift uncomfortably. The girls just nodded in acceptance before speeding towards their opponents. Luffy just folded his arms imperiously and stared down Arlong with a confident smirk on his face. You humans have some nerve to barge in here and challenge the mighty Arlong pirates. I will personally make sure that it's the last mistake you ever make. Chu sneered, spitting the word human out like a curse. You sure like the sound of your own voice, don't you? Bisca drawled with a bored look on her face. She clearly didn't think much of her opponent, which did nothing but piss him off. You inferior filth. For you too. That was as far as he got as Bisca got inside his guard and smacked him with the butt of her rifle, busting his large lips and drawing first blood. Chu recovered quickly and used the natural strength and speed of his species to close in on Bisca. But he was forced to dodge as the speed with which she drew her pistol from her waist and fired at him exceeded what he expected. Unfortunately for him though, she didn't let up and continued firing at him, targeting vital points, forcing him to dodge. Eventually her pistol clicked impotently, signaling that it was out of ammo. Chu pounced on the opportunity afforded to him. He attacked with sloppy punches, clearly untrained in close combat, but thanks to his genetic advantage, they were still dangerous. Unfortunately, for all his speed and strength, Bisca's reflexes were far superior, and she had no problems dealing with him. She discreetly dropped a few caltrops on the floor that he didn't notice before moving away from the area. Eventually Chu became frustrated and jumped back, falling on what he does best, Mizutehu. He spat out a powerful orb of water that tore through the concrete and headed straight to Bisca with impressive speed. But she wasn't helpless. Using a window ledge as a foothold, she jumped onto the wall of Arlong Park before scaling the wall rapidly. Hyapatsu Mizutepu. Chu shot out 100 smaller water guns after her, each denting the wall as she ran up it but never hitting her. As she got a foothold on the roof, she turned around in triumph. Feeling most comfortable from a great height with a good vantage point, she immediately pulled out her rifle and flipped out the scope. She took aim and fired accurately at his head, giving him no choice but to dodge. She took a second shot and made him backtrack. Third shot and she forced him to the left. Fourth shot and he was forced to jump back. Unfortunately for him, he landed on one of the caltrops, causing it to lodge deeply into his foot. The unexpected attack caused him to cry out on pain, grabbing his foot to soothe the ache. Unfortunately for him, that was all that Bisca needed to finish it. With lightning-quick reflexes, she primed her rifle, aimed, and fired. The result was a high-caliber bullet that went straight through Chu's forehead, killing him instantly. Bisca casually got up, blew the smoke off the point of her rifle and posed sexily with her hand on her hips. Hee-haw! Winner, Bisca. Luffy smirked in approval at Bisca's victory, but Arlong's face darkened at the death of one of his comrades. Be grateful, human. Today you will witness the might of the superior fighting style of my species. Fishman Karate. Hirobai boasted. The glacial look the Ryuju shot him could have frozen hell over. She looked at him like he was a common insect whose destiny it was to be squashed beneath her feet. He was about to open his mouth again, but Ryuju was tired of listening to all these fishmen talk about themselves. She blurred from her position with alarming speed. Collier. She sent a powerful kick with the top of her foot to Kurobai's neck. Eppo. She followed it up with a rapid axe kick to the shoulder. Paul Trine. She finished her mini combo with a strong thrust kick to his chest, her high heels adding to the already extensive damage of the kick. Kurobai flew backwards and just managed to stop himself from collapsing from the pain of the surprise attack. He spat out a little blood before glaring up at Ryuju, who just looked back with an ice-cold gaze. Kurobai lifted himself off the ground and got into a stance. It normally isn't my policy to bully weaklings, but you've pissed me off far too much for me to hold back anything. I will kill you here, inferior filth. Be prepared for my most devastating attack, the 1,000 tile true punch. Say goodbye. Kurobai gloated. Ryuju just cocked her eyebrow at him. 100,000 tile TR. He didn't get to finish his attack though. Just as he took his stance to deliver it, Ryuju seductively cocked her alluring hips, revealing the long slit in her dress. She slowly ran her hand up the bare portion of her tantalizing leg, catching even Kurobai's attention at her enthralling movements. As she reached the middle of her supple thigh, in the blink of an eye, she drew 3 throwing knives from the holster strapped to her thigh and threw them with alarming precision at Kurobai, who was too slow to dodge and was impaled on both of his arms and his left leg. He grunted in pain at the surprise assault, spitting out a little more blood. You coward! Kurobai roared in anger. Ryuju just cocked her eyebrow in amusement. I'm a pirate, Mr. Walking Food Supply. Did you expect some honor duel? Ryuju asked mockingly. Kurobai fumed in rage at her audacity. He charged once more and directed an arm thrust in her direction, which she nimbly jumped over. He continued his assault only to be met with the same results. He had greater upper body strength, but Ryuju had superior mobility, resulting in him missing 100% of the time. As time went by, his attacks became sloppier, and his movement was more labored. He eventually noticed when he had to stop and take a deep breath as exhaustion overtook him, which didn't make sense to him since his stamina was second only to his captain, Arlong. He focused his bloodshot gaze at his opponent. You, what did you do to me? He screamed, frothing at the mouth. Ryuju was smirked condescendingly to him. You didn't think I just threw 3 random knives at you, did you? She questioned mockingly. Those 3 were tipped with a special slow-acting poison of my own design. It will slowly decelerate the flow of your blood, eventually shutting down your nervous system before moving on to your organs. It may take a while, maybe a day or so depending how strong your immune system is, but you will die, slowly and painfully, she explained with a cruel smirk on her face at the look of horror that Kurobai displayed. The question is, can you find a doctor to treat you and somehow counteract the poison in time? Going by the amount of enemies you've made here, I would say the chances are slim. Good luck though. Button shot. She delivered a devastating thrust kick to his face, knocking him out cold and sending him shooting through Arlong Park, destroying a portion of it as he went. Winner, Ryuju. Luffy whistled in appreciation at the methodical way that Ryuju tore her opponent down. It was honestly terrifying to watch. Arlong's mood didn't improve as another one of his brothers were taken out. Pirate Huntress Kuina. Be amazed at my 6-style swir. Idoryu I, Shishi Sansen. All that was seen was a blur as Kuina sped past Hatch Eye while he was still speaking. The speed of her draw and slash couldn't be followed by eyes not belonging to her crewmates. In the few seconds that her actions took, the end result was Hatch-Eye's chest exploding in a shower of blood as he dropped face first to the ground. Hyuna whipped her sword out in an arc to clean the blood off before sheathing it coolly at her side with a frigid look on her face. Winner, Hyuna. Luffy's grin only widened at the result. Not that he expected anything else to happen. The villagers could only stare in shock at seeing Arlong's officers taken down so easily. 4 individuals effortlessly took out the entire crew, with the exception of Arlong, in a matter of minutes. It was the stuff of dreams for the oppressed villagers. Arlong was apoplectic. He was trembling in rage at what he just witnessed. "You, inferior filth, you dare to come here and harm my brethren in front of me, making a game out of it. You will rue the day you came here, boy. I will tear you limb from limb until you beg me for death." Arlong screamed hatefully, his eyes becoming completely red as his madness encompassed him. He punched into Arlong Park and pulled out giant sword in the shape of a saw. He tensed his entire body as he prepared to murder Luffy. Luffy just looked on with a bored expression on his face. Arlong took a few deep breaths to cool down his pulse. He didn't want to destroy his park in the process of skinning this human alive. "Are you done with your spiel? Unlike you, I actually have places to be. I don't really feel like entertaining you today, so do me a favor," Luffy drawled. "Don't blink," he said before vanishing in a spark of blue before Arlong's cry of pain was heard throughout the park. The villagers looked to Arlong only to see Luffy right in front of him, his arm lodged in Arlong's chest, his hand gripping his still beating heart. Arlong was paralyzed in fear as his mortality was made very apparent to him in this moment. He didn't even see Luffy move, nor did anybody else, his crew included. It happened in a fraction of a second. The speed of a single blink is far too slow compared to his movement. Arlong trembled in fear as he felt Luffy's hand enclose his heart. "Wait, don't do it. We can be partners. You don't know what you're doing, guy. He tried to beg and plead his case, but Luffy squeezed tightly, causing him to wail in pure agony. "I hate weaklings like you who feel the need to oppress the innocent just to feel good about yourself. You're a pathetic little worm with a sad inferiority complex. Look into my eyes, trash. I want my face to be the last thing to register in your mind as I rip your beating heart out. Die knowing that, in the end, you are inferior to a human. Remember that you were crushed like the impotent worm you are by Monkey D. Luffy," Luffy said malevolently before violently ripping Arlong's heart out of his chest. Arlong's body stayed upright for a few seconds before it dropped like a ton of bricks. Luffy had his still beating heart in his hand. He gazed upon the corpse of Arlong with disgust before crushing his heart. There was stunned silence in Arlong Park. The villagers couldn't believe their eyes, even though there were tears flowing down theirs. Arlong lay at the feet of the strange man who barged into his park, completely motionless, a large hole in his chest from where his heart was ripped out. It took a few more minutes for it to finally settle in, but when it did, Arlong Park exploded in cheers. Tears were released, laughter was heard. They were finally free from their 8-year nightmare. Nami couldn't stop the tears as she saw her oppressor, the same man who murdered her mother, dead on the ground. Luffy looked at the celebration out of the corner of his eye. He couldn't help the smile that came on his face at the joy of the villagers. For all of his talk of not being a hero, he sure finds himself doing shit like this a lot. He seriously needs to stop saving people. It's totally going to ruin his bad boy image. He felt his crew come to stand beside him. He smiled at them and gave them a nod of acknowledgement, a sign of his satisfaction at their performances. The girls stood up a little straighter at his gesture, happy to have been of use to their captain. The celebrations were cut short, though, by an annoying laugh. "Chichichi, I didn't think I would see the day that Arlong Park would fall. And to a bunch of no-name pirates at that. I'll be the one taking Arlong's head back to my base nearby along with collecting the bounty for him. The credit for the victory will go to me. If you don't want to be put on the wanted list, you will obey pirate scum." Captain Nezumi sneered. There were screams of outrage from the villagers at Nezumi's words. Luffy, though, went rigid. He slowly turned around, locking eyes with a slightly sweating Nezumi. The unhealthy gleam in Luffy's eyes didn't bode well for Nezumi. "You mean to tell me that there is a marine base nearby, run by you, a corrupt marine, that carries enough money to pay out bounties, along with supplies like ammunition, clothes and food and anything else that we may desire?" Luffy questioned rhetorically, before a maniacal grin threatened to split his face. His crew, understanding what he was getting at, had identical expressions on their faces. Nezumi started to sweat badly, having realized that he may have bitten off more than he could chew. "Let's have us a little talk, my new buddy," Luffy said as wrapped an arm around Nezumi's shoulder with a slightly psychotic look on his face, one that made Nezumi lose control of his bowels. Luffy's maniacal laughter could be heard throughout the Konami Islands. "Wait please, let's just forget I said anything," Nezumi begged as Luffy dragged him by the scruff of his neck towards his marine ship. Luffy wasn't having any of it, though. After his crew put a swift beat down on the weak marine grunts, Luffy and his girls wasted no time in tying them up and loading them onto the ship. He then grabbed Nezumi and walked to the ship, where the rest of his crew was waiting, whistling a jaunty tune all the way. He asked Shizuku to load their little sailing boat on the much bigger marine ship as he didn't want it left behind after the loyal service he got from it. His thoughts were cut short though as a familiar-looking orange-haired girl called out to him. I don't know if you remember me," she timidly said. Luffy just raised an eyebrow. "Nami, the pirate thief," Luffy answered, causing her to wince slightly at the look he was giving her. I wanted to thank you for saving my village," she replied gratefully before launching into the tale of the Arlong pirates, her mother and her self-appointed mission as well as the role that Nezumi played in it. If Luffy had any thoughts regarding her story, he didn't show it. If one looked closely though, they would see his fist clenched tightly at his side. "We don't have much to offer you except our gratitude. Even though I don't really like pirates, I want you to know that I will forever be indebted to you and your crew for your actions today," she said, uncharacteristically somber. Luffy just raised an eyebrow. "Shizuku, bring over that 100 million bully we found on the ship," Luffy shouted out to his navigator, who came swiftly towards him with the bag. Luffy had her plunk it next to Nami. "There's your 100 million back. Use it to fix your village. You people obviously have a lot of work that needs to be done and that money will aid your efforts," Luffy advised. Nami had tears in her eyes at his gesture. She wanted to deny the money, instead giving it to Luffy as a reward, but he refused. "I'm about to go raid this idiot's base. There will be plenty of money there for me to have. You guys need that far more than I do. I normally wouldn't give two shits about your village, but if there's one thing I hate in this world, it's corrupt marines. It may take a while for the people to get back to where they once were, but if you guys stick together, I'm sure you will make it eventually. You are free now. Follow your dreams and make the most of your life. Who knows, we may meet again out at sea. Till then, farewell Nami, the hero of Kakoyashi," Luffy said with a smile as he walked away. Not knowing the kind of impact he had made on the young navigator's life, she vowed to herself that she would not waste this new opportunity at life and do her best to live the best she could. The ship came to a stop in the bay of Marine Branch 16 and Luffy surveyed the island with a stony look on his face. Nezumi was secured tightly to the mast, at least 10 feet of the ground. Luffy wanted to give him a good view of what was about to happen. They kicked off all the unconscious Marines as soon as they docked, who were all sprawled over the floor in front of them. As his crew stood around him, Luffy spoke. It was a slow, measured voice that he used, one that the girls haven't heard from him thus far. But it was cold and filled with barely restrained hatred. "There's nothing more I respect in this world than a mother who is willing to face death to secure the safety of her children. The fact that said mother was one of their own and was allowed to die like a dog just so that they could fill their pockets makes the inhabitants of this base the lowest form of scum on the face of the planet," Luffy stated, barely containing his anger. The story of Nami and the actions of her mother hit him hard and very close to home. It opened up some old wounds that was festering his heart, and he was more than willing to take his pound of flesh from the target that was conveniently placed in front of him. The worthless trash that inhabits this base made a vow to uphold justice and protect the innocent, but it seems that as long as their pockets are lined, they will turn a blind eye to the suffering of the innocent. That is something that I cannot forgive. I was initially planning on just raiding this base for supplies, but this has become personal for me. I'm going to burn this base to the ground. Take all the money and supplies that are available. When that is done, go as wild as you want. I won't force you to participate in the bloodbath that's about to occur. So if you don't think you can stomach it, I won't begrudge you for that choice." His eyes swept the faces of his crew, and he was pleased to note that they all had varying degrees of anger on their faces. Even the normally emotionless Shizuku had a fire burning in her eyes. They couldn't stand the actions of these Marines any more than Luffy could, especially a former Marine like Bisca. This was everything she hated about her former employers. Unfortunately, it isn't something new to her as she's seen cases like this one far too often. "Very well, hold nothing back. It's time the world learns the consequences of angering the Blood Moon Pirates. Move out," Luffy ordered as they sped off in different directions. Luffy wasted no time in disappearing in a spark of blue as he sped through the corridors of the base in a matter of seconds before reaching the treasury. It was a large safe tucked away in a side room of Nezumi's office. He placed his palm on the door of the safe before channeling his lightning through it, allowing the conductive properties of the metal door to absorb the lightning. He upped the voltage, though, and kept increasing it until the metal started superheating. The portion of the door his palm rested on eventually turned red from the heat it was forced to endure before Luffy drove his hand through it, before unlatching the safe from the inside. As the door swung open, Luffy was greeted with the sight of large stacks of money. He estimated there was at least 70 million bullion inside. There were a few odd jewels and other trinkets as well. Luffy wasted no time and proceeded to load everything into a sack he pilfered from the room. After he was done emptying the safe, he looked around the room to see if he could spot anything else of value. Unfortunately, there wasn't much else worth mentioning. He did take something of interest, though, that being Nezumi's ledger along with the diary the idiot saw fit to keep. As he was making his way out of the office, the screams of the Marines stationed at the base reached his ears along with the accompanying explosions. He smirked to himself. It looked like his girls wasted no time in getting the party started. Luffy stepped out onto the courtyard of the base to see a scene that could only be described as the stuff of nightmares to young Marine. There was blood and bodies strewn all over the place as his crew tore through the place with vicious ease. Kuina danced through large numbers of Marines, cutting them down like they were paper dolls. Blood was spraying all over the courtyard as none could escape the range of her blade. The soldiers became more and more fearful and apprehensive of getting closer to her as she slashed through their ranks like a whirlwind of death. Many soldiers tried to beg for mercy, but Kuina heard none of it. She was a woman possessed as she sliced through their bodies without batting an eyelash, the cold look in her eyes not doing anything to assuage the mounting terror that was building up in those men and women. Shizuku wasn't any more merciful as she was literally punching people to death with an expressionless look on her face. Heads were sent flying and limbs were plucked from their sockets and used as weapons to beat people to death with absolute ease. It wasn't even a challenge for her. She literally crushed a large number of them when she ripped off the wall of one of the buildings and dropped it on a group of them. Instant death was the only outcome. She took to using their own cannonballs, which were about as light as regular tennis balls to her, and threw them with deadly and destructive precision, causing massive explosions to rock the base. The sadistic gleam in her eyes as she carried out her orders was something that drove a stake of fear into the hearts of the scrambling soldiers. Bisca was a lot cleaner in her dealings, but no less deadly. Bullets kept finding the center of Marine soldiers' foreheads with practiced efficiency. Her quick draw and situational awareness meant that most of the soldiers were dead before they even comprehended what was happening. It was a quick and painless death, more than some of them deserved. Riau was a lot less forgiving in her methods. Her brutal kicks caved in the chests of many soldiers, leaving them to choke on their own blood as the life drained from their bodies. Her poison-tipped blades were quick to find the mark too as she went for a more potent poison compared to the one she used on Kurobai. This one circulated their bodies a lot quicker, causing extreme amounts of pain and suffering. It would extend that suffering for at least 10 minutes before it snuffed out their lives. For them, it was 10 minutes too long. In short, it was an absolute massacre. Luffy was honestly a bit surprised at the brutality that was shown by his crew. He expected as much from Kuina and Shizuku, given the former's profession and the latter's circumstances. Bisca, though, was the one on the crew that seemed to be the most empathetic. But if he considered her area of expertise, it made a sense to him. As a sniper, killing was part of the job. One doesn't become a sniper by knocking out victims. You had to be a precision killer that never missed their mark. It seemed as though Bisca was just more versed in switching between mindsets. Something that seemed appropriate for a professional killer. Riau as well surprised him. Then again, considering that she was raised by a famous pirate and was surrounded by pirate patrons on a daily basis, it probably desensitized her to such levels of violence. Luffy wasn't complaining though. He was happy that his crew could take care of themselves if push came to shove and weren't squeamish about getting their hands dirty. He hoped to never have to repeat this unsightly scene again. But with the way the world was today, he highly doubted this would be the last he witnessed such carnage. He didn't want to be a captain that stood on the sidelines though. So after flashing away with their haul and dropping it off in the ship they stole, Luffy appeared in the middle of the base with a large number of soldiers surrounding him. He had a malevolent look in his eyes as he eyes the fodder that surrounded him. "Surrender, pirate scum." One of the braver Marine officers shouted at him, his voice clearly trembling in fear. Bravery or stupidity? Luffy could never tell. Luffy just grinned wickedly at them, causing them to gulp audibly. Suddenly his killing intent spiked, freezing the Marines in place, putting the fear of God into them before he uttered a single word. Discharge. A thick ring of blue electricity was released from his body, sweeping through the surrounding area, frying anyone it came into contact with. Soldiers dropped to the ground, all life having left their eyes as the current fried their nervous systems and shut down all activity of the brain. They were dead to the world. The smell of burnt flesh permeated through the air as many of the soldiers, who were further away from him, started to back away, fear having overridden their common sense. They fired their guns at Luffy frantically. To their absolute horror, the bullets just phased through his body, leaving being a few sparks of electricity as they entered the bodies of those soldiers who were standing directly opposite the ones that shot. Even more dropped dead. And this was at the hands of their own comrades. Luffy held up both hands, his fingers mimicking the pose of a gun. A small blue orb sprang to life at the tip of each finger. Static revolver. Sharp lances of lighting rapidly sprung forth from his fingers, like a gun firing bullets, and pierced the bodies of whichever soldiers he pointed to. The speed with which Luffy was able to fire off his lightning bullets was untraceable to their untrained eyes. All they could perceive was flashes of blue and dead bodies falling to the ground. After the job was done, Luffy held his fingers up to his mouth before cheekily blowing the smoke off and playfully holstering his fingers at his side. He smirked at the remaining Marines, ready to unleash a little more devastation upon them. But he saw the rest of his crew finishing up. It seems they became bored by the tedious amount of easy work they were doing. They lost interest fast. Luffy vanished in a flash of lighting before appearing at the front of the ship. He signaled the girls to pull back and they obeyed. It didn't take long for them to reach his side. They were covered in a lot of blood. But he ignored it. There were still a few Marines who were alive, but they didn't even think of taking a step further out of the pure terror that they were experiencing. Luffy looked to Nezumi, who was still strapped to the mast and had to smirk at the look of unadulterated fear that was plastered on his face. Luffy wanted to beat the shit out of the rat, but decided that a psychological attack was much more satisfying. Luffy wouldn't kill him. No, death is the easy way out for trash like him. He will live the rest of his life with the knowledge of the one-sided massacre that he had a front row seat to today. The pure, undisputed fear that was carved into his psyche will haunt him for the rest of his miserable life. Luffy made eye contact with each member of his crew before motioning them to sit back and watch. He raised his left arm to the air, his palm facing the sky. It was a motion that drew confused stares from his crew. A few minutes passed and still nothing happened. They were getting a little agitated, but their attention was drawn by a gasp of shock from one of the Marines that was still alive. They looked in his direction and saw him looking up to the sky in absolute horror. They followed his gaze and felt their eyes widening in astonishment at what they were witnessing. The sky had darkened considerably, but that wasn't the issue. The problem was the gathering of a thick covering of thunderclouds that were churning in the sky. They were circling each other slowly, making it look like a whirlpool in the sky with a black hole opening up in the center. Arcs of lightning were randomly discharged. The black hole in the middle of the whirlpool sparked to life as an orb of blue lightning condensed itself to life in the space provided. Many of the Marines that were still alive dropped their weapons in dismay and fell to their knees. The looks of hopelessness and resigned acceptance could be seen across their faces. Many prayed to whatever gods they could for salvation. Others cried tears of anguish and denial. None of it could save them from Luffy's wrath, though. His crew just watched his back with stunned silence. They knew their captain was strong, but they never imagined that he could do something like this. It just solidified their belief and their loyalty to the man they had chosen to follow. Luffy's cold, unforgiving gaze swept across the plaza, making eye contact with every Marine present. Time seemed to slow down as he almost whispered the last word they would ever hear. Judgment. The sky sparked to life as a colossal beam of condensed lightning tore through the atmosphere and struck the base with absolute ferocity. It was like the hammer of God descending to purge the wicked from this world. There was no pain. There was no escape. There was just annihilation. A bright flash of blue lit up the skies before a deafening thunderclap rang out throughout East Blue. The sound could be heard by many of the surrounding areas, and the flash of blue in the sky could be seen from the farthest reaches of East Blue. As quickly as the phenomenon came, it was gone. Like a whisper in the wind, its work was done. When the Blood Moon pirates surveyed the island once they could open their eyes again, after being almost blinded by the flash, they saw a scene that will be the stuff of nightmares for the world government for years to come. There was a giant hole where the 16th branch of the Marines used to be. There were a few large chunks of rock floating in the ocean, broken off from the island. But other than that, there was no evidence of there ever being a Marine base there to begin with. The girls didn't know if they could get any more shocked at the power that their captain so casually displayed, but he seemed to keep finding new ways to do so. Luffy dropped his hand to his side, before turning around and walking to Nezumi. He unshackled the catatonic man and flashed him to one of the floating chunks of rock. Luffy unceremoniously dumped his body along with the man's ledger and diary. Nezumi still didn't show any response other than staring blankly into space, a look of terror on his face. Luffy sneered at him one last time before flashing to his crew. He gave them a silent nod, signaling to them it was time to set off. Good work, everyone. I know it wasn't a good idea to draw as much attention to us as this probably will, but I guess I couldn't help myself. We'll deal with whatever comes our way. This is the real start of our journey. There's a long road ahead of us, but we will blow away anyone or anything that dares stand in our way. Luffy exclaimed, getting hearty cheers from his girls. Luffy smiled at them, thankful for such a loyal, passionate group of friends. His bad mood seemingly lifted. Luffy announced their next course of action. We have a crapton of money to splurge right now, along with plenty of weapons and ammunition. We even have us this shiny new ship, but it's a bit too big and gaudy for my liking. Plus, I doubt that we can handle a ship this large with just the 5 of us. There's a shipwright close to Longtown that has a good reputation. We'll make a stop there and have him reduce and remodel this ship to suit our tastes. It won't be the best, but it will do for now, at least until we can find a more skilled shipwright to build us something better. Shizuku, set our course and give Riau the instructions needed to keep us on course. Then I want you to grab your sketchbook and art supplies. We'll hammer out a cool design for our new ship, he ordered, getting affirmative responses from his crew. who scrambles to their positions. The Blood Moon pirates were currently docked on Skillet Island. It was an industrial island not too far from the entrance of the Grand Line, being just 20 kilometers west of Logtown. They were currently docked here, with their stolen marine vessel, to search out a somewhat famous shipwright in East Blue to build them a ship. Luffy and Riau disembarked and made their way through the island while the rest stayed behind. They asked around town, and got their answer from the locals that a man called Gumball is the guy they need to see for a quality ship. It took about 10 minutes for them to get to Gumball's workshop, following the directions they got from the locals. It was a fairly regular-looking workshop. Their knock was answered by an older man with a large blue afro and a bright orange jumpsuit. He wore unnecessarily large pink sunglasses that were shaped like stars. He was also missing a large number of teeth and had a horrifyingly crooked nose. All in all, he's the kind of guy that parents would tell their kids about to scare them into behaving better. Luffy and Riau, to their credit, didn't bat an eyelash, at least externally. Luffy had to try hard to suppress his natural instincts to point obnoxiously and laugh. He held himself back though. I'm looking for a man called Gumball. I was told he was the best at building ships in these parts. Luffy said, Kakakaka, you're at the right place, my fly-looking brother. Gumball's the name. Shipbuilding's my game. So watcha looking for? The strange man, Gumball, inquired. Luffy had to take a second to collect himself from the close exposure to such a colorful personality. Well, we're actually pirates. So do you have anything against building us a ship? Luffy questioned. Nah, I build ships, brother. All kinds and all sizes. What people do with them afterwards ain't my business. Gumball reassured. That's a relief. We actually stole a marine battleship not too long ago and was wondering if you could use it as a base to build us a ship. We're looking for something on the smaller size as we're only a crew of 5 at the moment, with possibly a few more joining later. But we don't want it being too small. We want enough room for lodging and other little additions. My navigator is actually quite the artist and we have a design on paper as well as certain features that we require. Do you think this is possible? Luffy questioned as he presented the design that he and his crew put together. Gumball whistled in appreciation at the design the Luffy presented to him. You already did all the hard work, brother. You gave me a design and a template ship to work with. It's simple from here on out. Give me 5 days and you'll have your Superfly ship. Gumball said as he flashed them a cheesy thumbs up. Luffy just sweat dropped but gave him a thumbs up in return. Gumball looked at Riau, expecting the same, but she just stared coldly at him, causing the poor guy to break out into a nervous sweat. Kikaka, I should probably get to work, he said nervously as he slowly backed away before entering his workshop and hastily shutting the door. Luffy just sweat dropped at his cook's scary personality. Not that he had much room to talk. The two of them decided to meet up with the rest of the crew and book a few rooms for the next 5 days while their ship was being built. A nice relaxing week didn't sound too bad. At the time, the Blood Moon pirates were having their ship built in a large building with multiple levels, surrounded by many marine personnel. A very important meeting was taking place. In the main meeting room, there was a long table that stretched the entire length of the room. It was filled with very official and important-looking Marines. They were all listening intently to what was being said. A hand was slapped hard against the board in the front of the room by the man who was addressing them. There were 4 bounty posters plastered on the board. Those 4 being that of Buggy the Clown, Hero of 1,000 Plans, Don Krieg and Sawtooth Arlong. 4 of the highest bounties in East Blue, taken out like they were common rubble. According to reports, Hero and Don Krieg were taken out by the second in command and the navigator respectively. The captain didn't even waste his time with them. He also took out the highest bounty, Arlong, in a fraction of a second. These are highly trained and dangerous pirates. If that wasn't enough, then horrific assault on the former 16th branch, and the state captain Nezumi was left in as a clear indication just how hazardous these rookies really are. We will not take the assault to one of our own lying down. This is why these bounties are unprecedented, but it is necessary. For justice, the man, Brenu, announced. For justice. The other Marines in the room echoes. The Blood Moon pirates stood on the dock of Skillet Island, looks admiration on their faces as they took in the sight of their newly built ship. It was a beautiful sight to behold. It was a decent-sized ship, smaller than the original battleship but slightly larger than an average caravel. It had a single mast with a crow's nest. There was enough deck space as well as black sails with their mark painted on. The ship was crimson-colored, with gold accents. There were cannons mounted at the front and on both sides of the ship. The most eye-catching feature, though, was the figurehead of what looked like a deviously smirking woman. The eye area of the figurehead was gold as well, and the hair area was a lighter shade of the regular crimson color, being more close to auburn. All in all, it was a badass-looking ship, in Luffy's opinion. Wow, you did an amazing job, Gumball, Luffy praised. I have to agree. It looks quite intimidating. Kuina added. It certainly looks like it could get us through the Grand Line. Plus it looks easier to handle compared to the one we stole before. Bisca commented. It definitely scores points for beauty, Ryuju remarked. Perfect. Shizuku's one-liner summing up their thoughts perfectly. Kakakaka. I'm glad you like it, brother. It's definitely one flashy ship. That's for sure. It's big enough to fit 10 individual bedrooms. They can be converted into something else if you need more space. There's a fully stocked kitchen, with a small greenhouse in the adjacent room for growing vegetables and other such plants. There is a training room with weights and a dojo. You've got an armory and a large safe for valuables. There's also a few prison cells at the bottom of the ship. Most importantly, though, there's a large bath area on the top floor. I didn't have much space to work with, but I managed to fit all the specs you wanted. Here's an instruction manual as well as a map. Good luck, brother, Gumball said as he handed Luffy a small booklet, which he immediately gave to Shizuku, as well as a page with the ship's floor plan. All that's left to do is name her, Gumball advised. Luffy put his hand on his chin and took up a thinking pose. He carefully scrutinized the ship from top to bottom, carefully taking in the figurehead and the Jolly Roger. I've got it, he announced, getting the attention of his crew as well as Gumball. Since we're the Blood Moon Pirates, I think it's only fitting that we stick with the moon theme. Therefore, it's only natural that our ship be named after the moon goddess. It will be the Artemis. The girls looked visibly impressed at the suggestion. I like it. Huana nodded emphatically. Yeah, it has a real air of mystery to it. Bisca pondered. It's only fitting that such a beautiful ship be named after a powerful goddess. I think it's perfect, Ryuju commented. Captivating. That obviously came from Shizuku, being satisfied with the work done. Luffy paid Gumball the amount owing before boarding his new ship. All right, crew, listen up. The next stop is Logtown, the last stop before the Grand Line. Let the first journey of the Artemis begin, Luffy announced, getting energetic cheers from his crew. It's been a day since they left Skillet Island on their new ship, and the Blood Moon Pirates were enjoying the open waters so far. The Artemis sailed smoothly through the waters and was much faster than any ship they've experienced so far. They were relaxing after a few hours of intense training in their new training room. There were various individual exercises that they performed on their own, from lifting and swinging weights to shadow boxing, target practice, endurance training, and even meditation. Strangely enough, though, when they were done with their individual training, Luffy had them get together for group training. That wasn't the strange part. No, what was strange was that he put them in pairs, with one person blindfolded and sitting in a seiza position with the other person swinging at them from behind with a shinai in an attempt to hit them. According to Luffy, the aim was for the blindfolded person to dodge. When they were skeptical of that actually being possible, he assumed the position and had Shizuku swing at him. She missed 100% of the time. Suffice to say, they were shocked at his inhuman senses. Therefore, they got to their task without complaining. He didn't tell them how to achieve it. He simply said that he wanted to see how far they would get. He promised that he would explain it eventually. They were all currently relaxing in various states. Luffy was lying on his back on the deck, looking up at the sky. Hyuna was casually leaning up against the side of the ship, enjoying the wind in her hair. Shizuku was stoically manning the helm, making sure they were on course. Ryuju was relaxing on a reclining chair wearing an outrageously skimpy bikini which, strangely enough, drew zero reactions from her crewmates. Bisca was currently paying the news coup for her paper. Luffy looked curiously as the bird flew off. You know, I've always wondered. There must be thousands of pirates with News Coup subscriptions. Why doesn't the world government just find some way to track the birds? That way, they would lead them to any pirate crew they want. Luffy pondered out loud, drawing curious stares and raised eyebrows from the girls. Now that he mentioned it, why didn't the government do that? One of the mysteries of the world. Their thoughts were cut off by a gasp from Bisca. They looked to her, only to see her staring at the paper in shock. Bisca, what's wrong? Luffy asked worriedly. She shook her head to get rid of the surprise and looked at her captain. You should take a look for yourself, boss, she said, as she placed 5 wanted posters on the deck. The rest of the crew gathered around and looked at what caught her attention. Wanted dead or alive. Deadshot Busujima Bisca, SS280000000. The picture consisted of Bisca standing on the roof of Arlong Park, her left hand on her hip and her right hand casually holding her rifle to her shoulder. A mischievous smirk on her face. Wanted dead or alive. Black Widow Ryuzaki Ryuju, SS340000000. Ryuju's picture consisted of her posing sexily with a seductive look on her face, the slit on her dress showing off her creamy leg as she had her hand on her thigh holster that carried her knives. Wanted dead or alive. Sleeping Dragon Saotome Shizuku, SS400000000. Shizuku's poster was of her standing in the middle of a bunch of limbless and headless marines, covered in a little blood. Her face completely expressionless but her eyes gleaming sadistically. Wanted dead or alive. Death Reaper Kimishima Kuina, SS470000000. Kuina's poster was similar to Shizuku's in that she was surrounded by the bodies she cut up in the 16th branch. Her battle kimono was stained with blood, as was Wado Ikamanji, which was gleaming dangerously. The cold look in her eyes only added to the menacing image. Wanted dead or alive. The Archfiend Monkey D. Luffy. SS70000000. Luffy's poster looked the most menacing of them all. It showed him standing upright, his long black hair and coat seemingly blowing in the wind. A malevolent look was plastered on his face with cruel-looking eyes. In his hand was a beating heart, the same one he ripped out of Arlong's chest. In the background, the sky was dark and there were arcs of blue lightning. Luffy didn't remember that being part of that scene. Did they paint it in? Oh, a man. I look like a total psychopath. They're totally making me out to look like a bad guy. Luffy whined as he stared at his poster. Airboss ... you are a bad guy. Bisca tentatively pointed out. All she got in response was an admittedly adorable pout from her captain that drew giggles out of the rest of his crew, minus Shizuku, whose eyes just lit up in laughter. Luffy pouted even more at his crew poking fun at him before teleporting to the corner of the ship where he was crouching with a rain cloud over his head and drawing circle on the ground with his finger, which only made them laugh more. Well, at least the pictures they used are good. We look sexy and dangerous. A good image boost for our crew, I would say. Riau commented, pleased with her wanted poster. But still, these are pretty outrageous bounties for a bunch of rookies. I mean, the lowest bounty on our crew is still 8 million more than the previously highest bounty in East Blue. She pointed out, the strength of our crew always guaranteed us a high bounty, especially considering how weak the opponents in this part of the CR. But the attack on the 16th brand is probably what amplified it exponentially. Headquarters are probably treating it like direct challenge to them and painted an even larger target on our backs. Bisca voiced her thoughts. We should probably get out of East Blue as soon as possible. I'm not too worried about any Marines coming after us, but right now, we are sitting ducks here in East Blue. They know we are probably heading to the Grand Line. They may have already taken measures to prevent us from reaching it. The sooner we get there, the more freedom we'll have to act. Kuina argued logically, getting nods of agreement from the rest. That's a good point, Luffy stated as he seemingly appeared next to Kuina, scaring the crap out of her. Shizuku, how long till we get to Log Town? 1 hour, 42 minutes. Excellent. That gives us enough time to get in, get our business done, and get the fuck out of there. The news crew just arrived with the new posters, so there's a chance that the Marines stationed there are still in the dark or at the very least severely unprepared. We need to keep a low profile and restock quickly, he stated, getting nods of understanding from the girls. Riau, take as much as you need from the treasury and make sure our food supply is fully stocked. Take Shizuku with you to help you carry it around, he ordered, getting nods from both of them. Bisca, I want you to purchase about 15 baby Den mushi as well as a large one for the ship. We have enough ammunition and tools, but if you come across something you think we need, buy it. Bisca gave him a mock salute in response. Kuina, I remember you telling me earlier that you wanted to get another sword. There should be a weapons store in town. I'm not sure if you'll find anything worth mentioning, but a good quality one to tide you over till we find another Mato should be good enough. Kuina nodded in acceptance. Of course, feel free to buy whatever else you girls may want for yourselves. I'm going to go check out the execution platform where the Pirate King was executed. I think it may be an enlightening experience, Luffy stated before his crew got ready to disembark and carry out their orders. Luffy was currently walking through Log Town at a leisurely pace. He had just visited an old bar that was apparently frequented by Gold Roger himself. It certainly was entertaining listening to the many stories the barkeep had about the man. He made sure to keep an eye on his crew though. He could faintly feel their auras on the edge of his senses. His range normally couldn't cover an entire island, especially one as big as Log Town. But the overwhelming difference in the quality of the auras of his crew compared to everyone else was easily noticeable to him. Not to say there weren't others with noticeable auras as well, because there were. But the amount of time spent with his crew made it easy for Luffy to pick them out of a crowd. He also gathered some info about the local Marine captain. And it wasn't the most pleasant news. Apparently Captain Smoker had a 100% record for stopping pirates from entering the Grand Line. If that wasn't enough, he had a Loja-class Devil Fruit. That didn't bode well for his crew. Luckily, he had confidence he could take the man on in a fight. His crew weren't ready for someone like him though. He would need to amp up their Haki training. He used his Kenbenshoku Haki to carefully avoid running into Smoker and making sure none of his crew got close to him as well. He came to a stop though, as he entered the plaza. This was the same plaza that the Pirate King walked through as he went to his execution. The platform was visible at the front as well. It stood like a monument of Gold Roger's last moments. He knew he was supposed to be keeping a low profile, but the temptation to see the same view as the last one the Pirate King saw was too much to resist. With that in mind, Luffy rapidly scaled the platform till his feet were firmly planted the top. He took a deep breath in and savored the sight in front of him, ignoring the officer ordering him to get down from the platform. The officer's warnings, though, were cut off as he took a massive iron club to the face. Luffy's attention was immediately drawn to the figure in front of him, having long sensed her entering the plaza. "You'll have to wait your turn, little man," she told the officer she knocked out before focusing her gaze on Luffy. "I've missed you, Luffy," she said sweetly. "It's been a while. Now don't tell me it's possible that you've forgotten this face." Luffy, for his part, had a strange smile on his face. A bead of sweat rolled down the corner of his face. He honestly didn't know what to do in a situation like this. "Alvida, you certainly look different." He wanted to shout like less of a walking fucking monstrosity, but he kept his tongue in check. There was no need to be needlessly impolite, especially to someone that didn't seem to have much negativity towards him. And Alvida did look different. In fact, if he wasn't already familiar with her aura, he would think she was a totally different person. She was taller, slimmer, with unblemished skin and a killer figure. All in all, she became extremely beautiful. How? Luffy had no fucking idea. "You lost your freckles," he finally blurted out. The reaction he got, though, was one that made him think that maybe he should have went with his first answer. Alvida's face lit up in unrestrained joy at his comment, a deep blush coming across her face as she gazed at him in pure adoration. "You noticed? Oh, I'm so happy. I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since you struck me that day. My body still remembers that wonderful sensation." She purrs out while hugging her body and shuddering in pleasure. Alarms immediately started going off in Luffy's head. His instincts were warning him, begging him to get the fuck out of there and never look back. He felt more danger from Alvida's lustful gaze than any other opponent he's ever faced. It's been a long time since he experienced it, but Luffy can honestly say that he felt fear in that moment. Suddenly, Alvida was surrounded by Marine officers who wasted no time in opening fire for assaulting an officer. Unfortunately for them, though, the bullets just slid off Alvida's skin and back to them. Luffy looked on in interest at this development. "As you can see, Luffy darling, I ate the sub no my. My skin will now allow anything that come into contact with it to just slip off," she informed dreamily. Luffy really needed to get the fuck out of there. His chastity was in serious danger if the rape face Alvida was directing at him was any indication. Luffy languidly stepped to the side, avoiding the pillory that attempted to capture him. He tiredly turned around to spot Kabaji, the acrobat from the buggy pirates that Kuina fucked up. Kabaji nervously looked at him, not expecting him to have avoided his attempt, and was about to speak up before Luffy forcefully cut him off with a backhand to the face, sending him flying through the air and getting launched into the wall on the far end. "Kabaji," a nasally voice cried out. Luffy turned his half-lidded gaze only to spot the big red nose of Buggy. "Oh, it's you," he drawled out. "What kind of reaction is that?" Buggy shouted with shark teeth in his mouth. Luffy just gazed at him with a look that said he was on the same level as a cockroach. Luffy wasn't in the mood to entertain any of Buggy's rubbish today, and he already drew too much attention to himself. He needed to get back to his ship quickly. He raised his finger and pointed it to a now nervously sweating Buggy. Spark shot. A blue lightning bullet was fired from the tip of his finger, hitting Buggy dead on, causing him to light up comically, his skeleton being visible from the electric shock before dropping to the ground, smoking. Alvida had hearts in her eyes at his cool display. Luffy decided to cut his losses and get the fuck out of there. But not before he did something important. "I'm going to be the Pirate King," he shouted out, silencing the plaza as everyone looked at him with varying levels of shock. For someone to have the audacity to announce that while standing on the spot that the last Pirate King was killed, he ignored Alvida's calls for him to come back as he vanished in a blur of speed. He had confidence that nobody in this town could catch him. He switched directions, though, when he sensed two familiar auras. The weather wasn't looking too good either. There seemed to be a massive storm coming in. "Hey girls, nice weather we're having," he commented as he casually ran up next to Kuina and Bisca. They both just shot him a deadpan stare. Clearly they weren't in the mood for his antics. Bisca seemed to have already dropped off her cargo as she only had a large backpack on her back. He noticed that Kuina had two new swords strapped to her waist. One of them was giving off an interesting aura. Their running came to a screeching halt though as a marine officer skidded into their path, her sword already being drawn. The reason for the stop, though, was because of the way the woman looked. Luffy had to do a double take when he saw her. She looked almost exactly like his first mate. She had the same hair color, except her hair being cut into a bob, and same facial features. That's where the similarities end, though. This officer was a bit slouched and seemed to lack a bit of confidence, whereas Kuina was brimming with it. Kuina walked upright, with an elegant gait, like a sharpened katana. Deadly and beautiful. Her lookalike seemed a lot more reserved. "Sencho, please go on ahead. I will deal with this," Kuina said blankly, her face expressionless and her intense eyes drilling a hole in the officer in front of them. Luffy knew better than to argue and had full confidence in his second-in-command. Finish it quickly, he ordered, getting a confident smirk in response. He nodded in response before speeding off, knowing there was a fight waiting for him as well if the aura he was sensing was anything to go by. Tashigi looked at Kuina, her face showing indignation. So you're the famous Kamishia Kuina, the former pirate huntress. You're a pirate now. For a villain like you to be wielding such a magnificent katana. I can't stand that the most beautiful blades in the world are in the hands of such scoundrels, being used to commit heinous crimes for fame and money. It's unforgivable, Tashigi shouted. It's my life's mission to remove those blades from the possession of pirates like you, starting with your Mato, the Wadu Ikamanjio. It shall be confiscated. Kuina just stared at her coldly, not a flicker of emotion on her face. Are you done yet, trash? Kuina drawled out, barely even acknowledging Tashigi's presence. We're on a bit of a tight schedule and my captain is expecting me soon, so I don't really have much time to be entertaining delusional little girls. Come at me so I can cut you down like the government dog you are and get on with my life. She finished with a sneer. Tashiga's face went red with embarrassment and anger at being treated like a nuisance. Don't you dare look down on me, she shouted as she rushed Kuina with her shiger. As she got closer, Kuina lazily held up her Wadu to block the strike. It wouldn't have been a big deal if it wasn't for the fact the sword wasn't even fully drawn. Kuina only pulled out about a quarter of the blade to block Tashiga's slash. Tashigi didn't let that deter her though, and kept up her attack. Swift slashes were directed towards Kuina, attempting to get into her guard and strike her down. The rain was beating down hard on the two combatants, but as the minutes ticked by, Tashigi was getting more and more agitated. Finally, after another one of her strikes were dodged, she exploded. Why won't you draw your sword? Why won't you fight me? Is it because I'm a woman? Is that why you're looking down on me? Tashigi raged. Kuina just raised a single eyebrow and looked at her like she was an idiot, which, in Kuina's mind, she was. You might need a new prescription for those glasses, trash. If you haven't noticed it already, I'm a woman too, said Kuina in a slow voice like she was speaking to someone mentally challenged. Tashiga's face reddened even more. Then why won't you draw? She raged. Kuina just smirked haughtily in response. I don't make it a habit of hunting rabbits with a cannon. There's no need for me to stain my blade with the blood of such a weakling. You simply aren't worth the effort, trash, Kuina mocked. Tashiga's face contorted into one of anger and hatred. How dare you look down on me? Pirate scum like you has no right. And my name is Tashigi. Kuina didn't respond with words as she blurred from her spot before appearing before a shocked Tashigi, catching her with a brutal elbow to the nose, fracturing it as well as breaking her glasses. Tashigi cried out in pain at the surprise blow before being kneed in the spine. She arced her back in an attempt to alleviate the pain. That did nothing but give Kuina another opening, which she readily took. She hooked her arm around Tashigi's exposed neck, taking a few seconds to hold her on a chokehold, before flipping her over her back and planting her on the ground face down, hard. Tashiga's sword went clanging to the side, away from her reach, not that she would be able to as she was in far too much pain at the moment. Her humiliation wasn't over though as Kuina stood over her and planted her foot on Tashiga's head, pushing it down into the dirt. I can't stand the fact some world government dog has the same face as me. Of course, it's only my face that was copied and none of the skill it seems. Kuina mocked. Let me make something clear to you, trash. I don't like you. You're a self-righteous bitch who seems to think that swords are meant to be pretty little wall decoration. Newsflash, dumbass. They are tools meant for fighting and killing. You say that all the swordsmen of the world today use their swords for fame and money. But aren't you getting paid by the Marines to swing that sword of yours at pirates? So how are you any different? As a matter of fact, you said that you plan to take all of the Matos off the hands of pirate scum? Yes. Well, that sounds like the behavior of a pirate to me. Hoarding and gathering treasure for your own selfish desires. No, hero. Tashiga's muffled voice was cut off as Kuina stomped down on her head. I didn't give you permission to speak, trash. You're nothing but a worthless hypocrite. I wouldn't expect anything less from a Marine. Kuina spat out. Let me make something clear to you right now. Don't ever think of comparing yourself to me. You are nowhere near my level, weakling. Your swing lacks purpose. Your blade is empty. You have no resolve. You are weak. Kuina punctuated each word with a stomp to the head. Tears were rolling down Tashiga's face at the pain and humiliation that she was facing. Until you find that resolve, never appear before me again. You aren't worth my effort. And as far as your name goes, I heard what it was. But as far as I'm concerned, your name is trash. Until you can prove me otherwise. Kuina sneered before finishing with a hard kick to Tashiga's side, like she was kicking a soccer ball, sending the Marine flying and crashing into one of the surrounding buildings. As she hit the wall, she screamed out in pain before crumpling into the ground and curling up into a fetal position in an attempt to mitigate the pain she was feeling. Kuina just scoffed at her in disdain before taking off after her captain. Winner, Kuina. After leaving Kuina behind to deal with her doppelganger, Luffy and Bisca ran a bit further along only to come to a stop not too far from where their ship was docked. In their path was a large man on a motorcycle. He was dressed in a modified marine uniform. There were cigars holstered on his arms and pockets. He had a large, muscular frame with white hair. He also had 2 cigars in his mouth that he was currently smoking. His motorcycle, strangely enough, was smoking as well. The Archfiend, Monkey D. Luffy. As captain of the Logtown base, you will not be making it to the Grand Line, pirate scum. No pirate has ever gotten past me, and I will make damn sure that you won't be the first. He roared out with a gruff voice. Headquarters seems to think you're a treat and put a hefty bounty on your head. But I don't see the hype. After today, you will have new accommodations in the form of a cold prison cell. He finished before getting off his bike and standing in Luffy's way. Luffy just smirked at him, his blood boiling a little at the prospect of a good fight, something that he hasn't been able to experience since his fight with Shizuku. Bisca, get to the ship and get ready to set sail. I won't be long, he ordered, getting an affirmative nod from his sniper, who swiftly jumped to the roof of the adjacent building and speeding off towards the ship. Smoker didn't even bother looking in her direction, his eyes being firmly planted in Luffy's direction. You're in for a rude awakening if you think you will be able to get past me, Archfiend. Shishishi, it's you who's in for a rude awakening, Smokey. Luffy teased. Smoker didn't react, but his body started releasing white smoke. Suddenly his arms transformed into smoke as well before Smoker thrust them forward, causing 2 large pillars of smoke to shoot from his arms and speed towards Luffy. The smoke surrounded Luffy before closing in on his body and semi-solidifying, trapping Luffy. He didn't panic though and used a simple application of Soru to vanish and appear to the left of Smoker. Luffy executed a roundhouse kick that took off Smoker's head, which just dispersed into smoke before his body did the same before reforming a few meters away from Luffy. Smoker took a few seconds to just stare at Luffy, seeming to take a measure of him. Luffy just smirked mischievously at him. Smoker had a tick mark on his forehead at the irritating behavior. He cocked his hand back before punching forward. White blow. A huge pillar of condensed smoke rushed towards Luffy with impressive speed. He jumped over the attack though, with his inhuman leap. But Smoker wasn't someone to be underestimated and had his attack divert and follow Luffy like a homing missile. Luffy surprised Smoker as he seemed to kick the air and change directions, heading straight for him. Smoker let go of his attack and initiated a new one in front of him to catch Luffy, but Luffy simply disappeared mid-air. Smoker was too slow to turn around as Luffy snuck up behind him. Luffy punched through his head again, with the same result as before. But this time, he didn't anticipate Luffy snatching his jut right off his back. As he reformed himself, Smoker clicked his tongue in frustration at letting his guard down so easily. He didn't expect Luffy to have such tremendous speed. It far outmatched his, but Luffy couldn't do much against him, to Smoker's mind at least, due to him Loja defenses. But with his Kairoski jut in hand, it could prove to be a real problem for Smoker. At first, Luffy just snatched the jut to mess with Smoker. But as he held it to his side and felt the tip come into contact with his leg, he felt the familiar effects of Kairoski. He didn't even try to hold back the evil grin on his face as he looked at a slightly sweating Smoker. Luffy was planning on getting at least one solid, debilitating Haki-enhanced hit on Smoker, to take him by surprise and knock him out. But he wasn't happy about that plan as he didn't want to expose his skill in Haki before he reached the Grand Line. Although, whether the higher-ups would believe Smoker's report of him being a Haki user or just write it off as him making excuses for his loss was another thing. Luffy still didn't particularly like taking that chance though. But now that he had a nice Kairoski weapon in hand, it made things a little easier for him. Smoker immediately dispersed his body and rushed at Luffy briskly from 4 different angles, his detached hands and feet leading the way. Luffy just smirked before vanishing in a burst of sorrow. Smoker plunged into the area the Luffy once occupied, being too slow to catch him, before all the smoke coalesced back into his form. He carefully looked around, trying to spot his opponent. He didn't have much time to react though as Luffy appeared behind him in midair. Smoker was far too slow to react as Luffy jabbed him in the back of his neck with a solid thrust from the jut. The Kairoski bypassed Smoker's Loja defenses and his neck exploded in pain as he was flung forward. Luffy didn't let up though as he disappeared once again and appeared above Smoker's body that was sailing across the air and sent 5 quick, powerful jabs to his back. Smoker grunted in pain as his body was forced to hit the ground, though it was still skidding across it. He eventually came to a stop in a heap. Smoker took a few seconds to catch his breath and get to his knees, pain racking his body at the blows he received. It was the first time that he experienced such pain since he ate his fruit. He coughed up a gob of blood and slowly raised his head, which was a bad idea, as in the process of raising his head he caught the appearance of black boots in his vision. It was too late to stop though. He looked up into the playful eyes of Luffy, who looked down at him from his position. Smoker gritted his teeth in impotence at the position he was forced to take in front of a pirate. Sorry, Smokey, but you're not ready for my stage yet. Train up a bit more instead of relying on that devil fruit of yours, Luffy suggested, and Smoker wasn't sure as he was mocking him or being serious. He didn't get a chance to think on it though as Luffy struck him in the throat with the tip of the jet. The force of it knocked the breath out of Smoker and caused him to choke in a futile attempt to take in air. It was for nothing though as the damage was done. Smoker passed out a few seconds later from the lack of oxygen. Luffy looked down at Smoker without a hint of what he was thinking on his face before dropping the jet on the ground and walking off in the direction of his ship. Stop, pirate. Put your hands in the air and surrender. A voice ordered as Luffy was suddenly surrounded by marine officers, all having guns raised and pointed in his direction. Luffy just exhaled in annoyance. He raised his hand and was about to take care of them before his entire body stiffened. Without warning, the atmosphere above Logtown churned unnaturally. Suddenly there was a titanic gust of wind that swept through the town. Stands were turned over and people were blown off their feet. Many people scrambled for purchase in an attempt to stay upright and not be carried away by the powerful current. The sea surrounding Logtown swayed violently in response to the strong gust. The Marines surrounding Luffy were swept off their feet and blown out of his way. Luffy was still stiff though as he was experiencing something different from the others. Just before the wind blew through the town, a monstrous presence erupted behind him. It was the largest and most powerful aura he's ever felt in his life. The only person even coming close to it being his grandpa. What was even more disconcerting was the fact that this person seemed to be standing behind him the entire time. He only released his presence when he caused the storm to blow through the town and his presence lit up like the sun to Luffy. Luffy didn't move for a few seconds, taking the time to regain his bearing after the shock he experienced. He slowly looked out of the corner of his eye without turning around. He spotted a man in a green cloak with red markings on his face. He recognized the man immediately, but he didn't give any outward reaction, simply because he wasn't sure how to react. He just stared for a few seconds before nodding his head in thanks before vanishing from the spot and making his way back to his crew. At the very least, it didn't seem the man intended to cause Luffy and his crew any harm. If anything, he seemed to be aiding them. Luffy put it out of his mind though as his ship came into view. Shizuku, set sail, he shouted. It seems as though she heard him because the sails of his ship unfurled and caught the generous wind that was afforded to them and sped away from the bay. Luffy kept his sprint up as the end of the bay approached. His ship was already quite a ways away. As his foot is the end of the dock, he kicked off the ground in a freakish leap and made it quite far into the ocean. He was just a bit short of his ship though. It wasn't a problem to Luffy, as it would be to others, as he kicked the air behind him and used it as a foothold and completed his journey and landed silently on the deck of his ship. He looked around and did a quick head count and was pleased to note that all of his crew was present. Right, we're stocked up and ready to go. Shizuku, plot a course to Reverse Mountain, Luffy ordered. Shizuku took the helm as the rest of them scrambled to their position to assist their navigator. The ocean was violent as a powerful storm raged through it as the Blood Moon pirates approached Reverse Mountain. They could see the powerful upward current that wasn't too far away from their position. It was only a matter of minutes that they would catch the current and get a one-way trip to the Grand Line. Their anticipation was interrupted, though, by a cannonball splashing near their ship and an obnoxious voice sounding over a loud speakerphone. Blood Moon Pirates, this is Rear Admiral Wreckett from the G7 base. I'm here for your capture. Surrender quietly, the voice of Wreckett ordered. Luffy just stared at the four approaching marine ships that were led by a larger warship. With half-lidded eyes, he was getting really annoyed with Marines constantly getting in his way. Ray, take the helm and keep up on course. Bisca, man the cannons and take out as many ships as you can. Shizuku, the crate of cannonballs that's placed near the helm is for you. Introduce those ships to as many as it takes to sink them. Huana, you and I will make sure none of those cannonballs hit us. You take the right and I'll cover the left. We will not let them get in the way of our voyage, Luffy ordered, getting affirmative cries from his crew. Bisca entered the level below the deck and prepared the cannon. She was a sniper, so one shot was all she needed. After calculating the angle that she needed, she primed the cannon. After locking onto one of the regular ships, she fired, sending it sailing beautifully towards the unsuspecting Marine. The cannonball struck dead center of the ship, tearing through the body of the ship and destroying the hull. This, aided by the raging storm, caused the ship to tear down the middle and split in half. This caused a chain reaction as the large mast of the first ship broke off and crashed through the deck of the one next to them. Both ships were no longer in any state to pose a threat as the personnel had to focus on simply staying alive in this turbulent storm. The other ship didn't have much luck either as they were up against something much worse in the form of an emotionless Shizuku who just kept chucking cannonballs at their ship at a blistering pace. They couldn't deal with the constant bombardment and the number of holes she opened up on their ships. The other two vessels besides the warship were slowly sinking into the ocean and fires raged on the decks from the extensive damage of Shizuku's assault. The rear admiral didn't look as confident all of a sudden. When he was given this assignment, he thought it would be a walk in the park, some wannabe rookie with an undeservingly high bounty from the weakest sea. It would have been what he needed to secure his promotion. But as he stared at the pirate captain who had his arm, which had blue sparks bursting to life around it, pointed at their warship... The rear admiral decided that next time, it would be prudent to actually read the reports that were given and take them seriously. Railgun, Luffy uttered as a condensed beam of lightning was shot from his arm and tore through the space between the Artemis and the marine warship. The wooden structure of the ship didn't stand a chance against the powerful beam as it tore through the wood like it was made of paper. An explosion rang out at the bottom of the ship as fire rapidly consumed it. It was slowly sinking into the ocean as it simply never stood a chance. Luffy's thoughts were cut off though as a powerful current pulled their boat aside and sent it careening in the direction of Reverse Mountain. He held on tightly to the figurehead as his crew took up various positions around the ship, holding on to whatever available surface they could as to not get thrown off. The current directed them to the base of Reverse Mountain, at which point their ship started climbing the mountain through the aid of the powerful stream of water. They all marveled at the unnatural phenomenon. They had to keep their wits about them though they were rapidly approaching the top. After a few more seconds, they broke through the cloud cover and reached the peak of Reverse Mountain. It was a breathtakingly beautiful view as they beheld the world from above the clouds. They were afforded a few seconds to take in the view before they reached the edge and started their rapid descent into the Grand Line. There were excited smiles all around, a sense of great anticipation and adventure that was palpable. The silence was broken, though, by Bisca's shout. "Hey boss, is there supposed to be another mountain in the way?" She shouted out her question as she looked to the front of the canal. Luffy looked baffled at her question before he focused his gaze to the front. He took in the massive wall of something that was lying dead center to their route. He could only think of one word to sum up their situation. Shit. Wow. We're barreling straight into it. Luffy languidly remarked as he gazed at the monstrosity in front of him. What are we going to do, Sencho? Hyuna questioned her captain, looking wholly unconcerned about potentially crashing to their death. Stop looking so fucking calm, you crazy sword bitch. Bisca shouted comically at Hyuna with shark teeth in her mouth. Meh, there's no need to get so worked up, Bisca. I'm sure our captain has a plan, Riau advised as she casually leaned against the side of the ship, gazing at the obstacle with half-lidded eyes. Bisca looked to her last bastion of hope... only to see Shizuku calmly sketching the view in front of them. Heedless to the turbulent rain and wind... or the fact that they were about to crash into a fucking mountain. Bisca just hung her head. I don't even know why I bothered, she muttered, remembering the immovable nature of their navigator. The end of the world could be happening, and she would probably be coolly sitting at a buffet stuffing her face with as much food as she could, while still managing to look elegant all the while. Suddenly, Bisca felt like crying. Am I the only sane one on this ship? She raged. Shishishi, don't fret so much, Bisca. You're just as sane as I am. Luffy tried to reassure her, which did nothing but send her further into her pit of depression. It was a well-established fact that her captain was a fucking lunatic. Bisca decided that she would ignore all the crazy antics of her crew for now... but made a mental note to go to her room later so that she could curl into a ball and cry. But still, I should probably do something about this. I don't want our shiny new ship to be damaged by whatever the hell this is. Luffy pondered out loud. They were closing in on it fast, and it was starting to look even more colossal by the minute. Luffy jumped overboard and flipped midair to turn and face his ship head-on. He pushed his hands onto the figurehead and started rapidly kicking the air behind him. His unorthodox application of Jeppu created massive air waves behind him and was actually working and slowing them down. Luffy pushed his body even further and kicked with all of his might, ignoring the strain on his legs. He kicked and kicked until his ship came to a crawl and gently bumped into the mountain before leisurely floating in the waters before it. Luffy used the figurehead to propel himself into the air and silently landed on the deck. Woohoo, way to go, boss. Bisca heartily cheered, a look of relief plastered on her face. HMPH, I never doubted him for a second. Hyuna scoffed at her, prompting Bisca to pull her eyelid down and blow a raspberry in her direction. Hyuna had a tick mark on her forehead, the childish response, and was sorely tempted to unsheath her katana. But seriously, what is this thing? There wasn't any memo about an obstacle in the way of the entrance of the Grand Line. It's supposed to be open waters after passing the Twin Capes, Riau commented. Luffy was scratching his head in confusion as well. He wondered if he should use his powers to vaporize the obstacle, but he didn't want to destroy a landmark... if that's what it was supposed to be. Well, Shizuku blandly pointed out, immediately catching the attention of the rest of the crew. They all took another look, a closer look... and realized that indeed... it was a big-ass whale. Just as they came to this realization... its eye snapped open and its gaze focused on them. Fuck. Luffy's comment summed up their thoughts as the whale opened its large mouth and swallowed the surrounding waters, including their ship. Luffy used Jeppu to jump into the air and send a strong punch at the whale, doing nothing but angering it. "Don't eat my ship, you stupid whale," Luffy scolded as he continued to engage the whale as his ship was swallowed. His crew just looked at him with deadpan stares as they watched him pick a fight with a monster whale. The girls were standing on the deck of the ship and took in the scene before them with a blank look in their eyes. There were many strange things they bore witness to ever since they decided to follow their captain. This though ... was something that they were failing to fully comprehend. "Hey ... we were clearly swallowed by a whale, right?" Bisca skeptically asked as her eyes stared vacantly ahead. "I'm pretty sure we were," Riau answered, a hint of doubt in her voice making it sound like a question rather than an answering statement. She was just as confused as Bisca. Kuina was busy massaging her temples, hoping to fight off the headache that she could feel approaching. Shizuku, for some reason, was coolly eating a banana. Nobody knew where she got it from and they were too afraid of the answer to ask. "Okay ... if we were eaten by a whale ... then why does this look like the fucking outside?" Bisca screamed. They were currently floating in an ocean that was slightly green in color. The sky was blue and there were a few birds in the sky. The sun seemed to be happily shining down upon them. There was even a small island not too far from their position. It had a small cottage complete with a tasteful palm tree and reclining beach chair. "I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation to this," Riau stated, having seemingly gotten over the bizarreness of their situation. "Paint," Shizuku noted after finishing her banana. She was pointing to the sky. The others followed her gaze and noticed that the birds weren't moving. They were frozen in place, as were the clouds. If one looked closely enough, you could see the paint chipping off to reveal some sort of metallic surface. "What do you know?" Bisca muttered while scratching her head in confusion. "So operating under the assumption that we really were swallowed by a whale. The inside of said whale was painted to look like an island paradise," Kuina said slowly ... as if trying to fully comprehend what she was saying. Even she was having trouble grasping the reasons for such a strange place. "We haven't even fully entered the Grand Line and we're already confronted with all sorts of crazy." Riau tossed out her comment. Their discussion was interrupted by the water in front of them exploding upwards as a giant squid emerged. Kuina immediately drew her sword and Bisca primed her rifle ... but it was unneeded as 3 large harpoons emerged from the inside the house at high velocity and pierced the head of the squid, killing it instantly. There was absolute silence for the moment. The crew tensed themselves in anticipation. They clearly weren't alone in here. The sound of footsteps echoed loudly as a large silhouette could be seen at the entrance of the door. The person stepped out to reveal the strangest looking man any of them has ever seen. He was tall with a large frame and appeared to be an older man. He was dressed in a pink tropical shirt, blue shorts and plain wooden sandals. He was bald at the top of his head with a flower-shaped crescent growing around the top of his head. He had a long goatee and round spectacles. The man paused at the entrance of his home and looked intensely at the Blood Moon pirates. He didn't blink as he turned and walked to the side, never once taking his gaze off them. Tension started to rise rapidly as only the sound of the man's footsteps could be heard. The girls were all tensed and ready to spring into action. They wondered what kind of action the man was going to take, which is why they couldn't be faulted for face planting on the deck when the man casually sat in his reclining chair and flipped open his newspaper. "Say something, you asshole," Bisca comically shouted at him with sharp teeth. The man paused for a second before his intense gaze locked on them once again. "We have a cannon primed here if you want to fight, old man," she threatened. The man's gaze only intensified further upon hearing that. The tension rose once again as his eyes drilled into them with even more ferocity as the seconds ticked by. Everyone was frozen in pace, unsure of what to do. "Don't, or someone will die." The gruff voice of the man sounded out in an ominous tone. The girls were immediately on guard at the veiled threat in his words as the atmosphere were putting them even more on edge. "And who would that be?" Riau dryly questioned. "Me," the man answered quickly. "You," Riau uncharacteristically shouted with sharp teeth. This old guy was really starting to get on her nerves. Kuina put a hand to her shoulder. "Calm down, Riau. There's no need to lose your cool," Kuina advised, causing the cook to take a deep breath and center herself before adopting her usual look of cold indifference. Her eyes, though, spoke of serious bodily harm for the old man. Kuina stepped to the front of the ship and addressed the strange man. "Oji-sama, could you please tell us where we are, and perhaps who you are?" she asked politely. The man's eyes once again intensified before penetrating them. The atmosphere became uncomfortable as the man's glare was raising the pressure around them. He finally spoke after about a minute of the stare down. "If you want something from someone, it's proper manners to introduce yourself first," the man advised sternly. Kuina flushed a little in embarrassment at her lack of proper manners and proceeded to hastily apologize. "Forgive my rudeness. My name is Kimish." That was as far as Kuina got before she was cut off. "I am Crocus. I am the keeper of the Twin Capes Lighthouse. I am 71 years old, Gemini, blood type Ab. All emotion melted of Kuina's face before she started to unsheath her wada, which glinted dangerously in the artificial light. Bisca hurriedly held onto Kuina's hand, preventing her from drawing and trying to calm her down. Kuina's eyes, though, were emitting an impressive intent to kill as she looked at Crocus. You want to know where you are? You come to my one-man resort ... and then you yell such rude things at me. Do you think you're inside a rat's stomach? He questioned. That just confirmed to them that they were indeed inside the stomach of the whale. So that would mean that this isn't really seawater ... but rather stomach acid. Gross. I don't want to be digested, Bisca remarked as she pulled a sour face. The eyes of Crocus once again increased in intensity as he drilled them with his stare. The minutes ticked by before the girls became fed up with him. Stop doing that, Bisca and Riau shouted at him. Kuina's killing intent just rose even further, and Shizuku was ignoring absolutely everybody as she lounged in her favorite chair. Can't you appreciate a good running gag? Crocus queried. A gag. As for the exit, it's over there, Crocus informed as he pointed to a wrought iron door behind them. The girls turned robotically to where he was pointing before looking blankly at the door. They stared for a few minutes. There was absolute silence. I never thought I would ever ask this question in my life, but ... why is there a door inside the stomach of a whale? Riau asked in a flat tone of voice. The better question is, why is there a sky with seagulls and clouds painted on the inside of a whale? Bisca remarked rhetorically with an equally flat tone. I like having fun, Crocus unexpectedly answered. Just what the hell are you doing here? Bisca shouted with shark teeth, once again losing her cool at the infuriating old man. It's okay, just leave him alone, Riau advised, having grown tired of the old man's annoying personality. Shizuku, the exit is over there. Let's get out of here before I paint the walls with this old man's blood, Kuina ordered. Bisca and Riau sweat dropped at her. They had absolutely no doubt that she was 100% serious about killing the guy. Shizuku nodded and got off her seat to carry out the order before the ground started to tremble. The stomach acid started churning violently. He started again, Crocus commented. The girls looked back at him to see the true nature of his little island, that it was in fact a ship, with iron coating the bottom. The girls knew they needed to get out of there quick, as the stomach acid of the whale will slowly start eating away at their ship. What exactly has he started? Bisca questioned curiously. This whale, Laboon, has started ramming himself against the red line. While a little shocked, the girls thought back to the numerous scars they spotted on the head of the whale. They concluded that he was probably in a lot of pain. They didn't want to stay any longer than they needed to, though, and made to move their ship towards the exit before it dissolved. Just as they were trying to navigate the turbulent stomach acid, a trapdoor just above the exit slammed open before two people, who looked like they were booted through the air, came flying out. They were followed languidly by Luffy, who was using Jeppu to keep afloat in the sky. He dashed over to the two interlopers before grabbing them by the scruffs of their neck and moved towards his ship. He silently touched down on the deck, dropping his baggage like a sack of potatoes. The girls were visibly relieved to see their captain again. They could now get out of here without having to worry about finding him. They were never once concerned about his well-being, as they had full confidence that nothing could stand in his way. Those two scoundrels again. Crocus was upset when he spotted the two weirdos that Luffy dropped off. He put that out of his mind, though, as he hurriedly made his way through the same door that they came through to carry out his duty. After a few minutes, the whale seemed to have calmed down. So ... who are these people, boss? Bisca queried. Weirdos, Shizuku blankly commented. Tashigi, there was a hatch at the top of this whale, so I entered it. It turns out that the inside is a bit of an elaborate maze of corridors. I found these two bozos skulking around carrying two cannons with them, Luffy replied. They were both flamboyantly dressed, with the man having blonde hair and a crown on his head. The girl had blue hair that was done up in a high ponytail and was dressed like a dancer. Mr. 9, these are pirates, the girl whispered loudly to her companion. Kuina suddenly perked up at her remark. I can see that, Miss Wednesday, Mr. 9 replied to her as he looked at the faces surrounding them. But I think that we can convince them. Probably. Are you two scoundrels still here? Crocus roared out. Don't make me repeat myself. As long as I'm alive, you won't lay a finger on Laboon. The girl, Miss Wednesday, suddenly stared to giggle before the both of them got up and primed their cannons. You may say that, but we cannot retreat, she said. Killing this whale is our mission. Mr. 9 backed her up. We won't let you interfere in our whaling anymore. We'll rip a hole in its stomach. Let her rip, baby. Roger, shouted Miss Wednesday. They didn't get any further, though, as they were comically bonked on the top of their heads with a rubber mallet by Shizuku. They both crumpled to the ground, out cold. Naughty, she scolded expressionlessly. Where did she get that mallet? Bisca hurriedly questioned Riau in a whisper. Don't question it. The answer is probably best left unsaid. the cook replied tiredly. The Blood Moon pirates were in the outside once again, where Crocus, who was immensely thankful for them protecting Laboon, proceeded to explain that the two victims of Shizuku's tender mercies were residents of a nearby town and were on the hunt for the large stores of whale meat they could get from Laboon, which could feed their town for a few years. Crocus then explained the sad tale of Laboon, the island whale from West Blue. He told them of the jolly pirate crew the Laboon followed into the Grand Line and of how he thought of them as nakama. He also told them of his promise to look after Laboon for about 3 years while they sail around the world. Unfortunately, that was 50 years ago and the pirates still haven't returned. He explained that he was a doctor and was using his expertise to take care of Laboon from the inside. It was a sad tale for the Blood Moon pirates to hear of the struggles of the whale and his desire to see his friends again, so much so that he would harm himself in attempt to break through the red line. Luffy, though, had his eyes shadowed as he walked to the edge of the cape, directly in front of the wailing Laboon. His crew and Crocus watched him curiously before widening their eyes in shock as he delivered a solid punch to Laboon's head, right on his freshly opened scars. Laboon howled in pain before attempting to bash Luffy with his head. Luffy jumped back before attacking again. This time when Laboon attacked, Luffy took it head-on and flew back into the wall with impressive force. This back and forth continued for a while under the bewildered eyes of the spectators before Luffy raised his hand. "Stop." Laboon stopped, mid-attack at Luffy's command. "It's a draw," he stated, before smirking challengingly at Laboon. "I'm pretty strong, aren't I?" he said. "You want to beat me, don't you?" Luffy questioned. "Our battle isn't over, so we're going to have to fight again someday. Your nakama may be dead, but from now on I'm your rival. We'll fight again someday to decide which of us is the strongest. Once we're finished sailing the Grand Line, I'll be back. Then we'll finish our fight." Luffy finished with a smile as Laboon started to tear up before howling happily to the sky, agreeing to Luffy's promise. His crew just watched on with warm expressions. They would never doubt their captain, but he seemed to find more and more ways to endear himself to them. From his strength, to his charisma and now his compassion. It made them all the more grateful that they met and decided to follow him. They knew he would be somebody great in the world. They would do everything in their power to make it so. Crocus watched on with a happy smile at seeing Laboon finally connecting with someone else and hopefully putting his trauma behind him. Luffy chuckled at Laboon's happy expression before asking Shizuku to bring him the paint supplies. The rest of the crew were chatting amiably with Crocus as Luffy got to work. It took about half an hour before he was done. He proudly displayed his crudely drawn Jolly Roger on Laboon's head. "Okay, Laboon, you can't go ramming your head into the red line anymore or else the mark will be erased. That mark is a symbol of our promise," Luffy said, which got a happy wail from Laboon. After finally settling in, they were faced with another problem when Shizuku held up her compass, which was rotating wildly, to Luffy. "Broken," she said. "Oh, don't worry about that, Shizuku-chan, I've got just the thing," Luffy stated before running back into the ship. While he was gone, Crocus explained the chaotic nature of the magnetic fields in the Grand Line and how a regular compass would be absolutely useless. Luffy came back out holding a wrist bracelet that had a small globe in the center with a directional needle suspended in the middle. "This is a log pose." Luffy presented the device to Shizuku. "It's a unique compass that memorizes a magnetic field," Crocus supplemented. "Without a log pose, sailing the Grand Line is impossible. The islands here obey the rules created by magnetic fields. In order to travel from island to island, the log pose must readapt to the magnetic field at each island, and it will point you in the right direction. The truth is that there is no way to determine your exact position on this ocean. You are utterly dependent on the magnetic field memorized by your log pose. You must first choose one of the 7 magnetic fields emanating from Reverse Mountain, but regardless of which island you choose to start from, your route will eventually join the others into one final route, and the name of the island on the end of that route is Raftel, the final island of the Grand Line. Only one man has ever set foot on that island." The crew was silent after the little lesson that Crocus gave them. It certainly was an educational experience for them after the relative normality of East Blue. It proved that the dangerous reputation of the Grand Line was well deserved. "Well, we'll find out what Raftel is like eventually. Maybe we'll come back and tell you about it, Asen," Luffy commented with a confident smirk on his face. His crew all perked up and smiled at his confidence. It filled them with energy. Crocus just looked at Luffy with a nostalgic smile on his face. He remembered another man with an unyielding confidence and willpower to carry out his dreams. Crocus chuckled quietly to himself. Eventually they left Crocus to his own devices and tended to their ship, making sure it was in sailing condition after she experienced the turbulent nature of Reverse Mountain. After that was done, Luffy called a meeting after consulting with Kuina. The crew were currently standing around a large round table that had a large world map drawn on it in what Luffy dubbed the War Room. It was a room that had weapons lining the wall as well as a few bookshelves. The large table in the middle was the centerpiece and could be used to iron out their strategies and plans. Baroque works, Riau parroted. It's a criminal syndicate. They are a large organization of mostly bounty hunters who hunt bounties in groups. Their overall goal is still largely unknown. Luffy explained. They've been trying to recruit me for a while. I remember being approached by the lower-level agents in East Blue. They all have code names, like Mr. Nine for example. That's what made me remember them when those two idiots gave out their names. They're no doubt part of Baroque works, Hyuna stated. What would they be doing here at the entrance of the Grand Line, hunting a whale, if they're such a large organization? Riau pondered. Perhaps that's part of the scam. The reverse mountain is the entrance to the Grand Line from all of the blues. What better way to hunt a bounty than to take them out as soon as they enter the Grand Line, when they're still disorientated from the trip? Bisca suggested. That a thought-provoking suggestion, Bisca, but I think we might be overthinking things. Those two are beyond weak. Buggy was the lowest bounty we turned over and he would have flattened those two in seconds. I think that they're just really incompetent. Luffy deadpan, getting sweat drops from the girls. Normally I would just kill them, but something about the girls is a bit strange. How so? Hyuna curiously inquired. How can I put this? She doesn't really feel evil. She's a walking contradiction of emotions. I don't doubt that she is up to something. It's not anything malicious against us though. Underneath that airheaded exterior of hers, I can feel a strong resolve. I say we just let them go and see what happens. I'm actually curious about them, Luffy said. Hyuna and Shizuku nodded in acceptance, as did Riau. Bisca on the other hand wasn't so ready to throw in the towel. Not for reasons thought though. Okay, are we just going to ignore the fact that our captain just spoke about feeling people like it was an everyday occurrence? Bisca remarked, getting half-lidded stares in response. The reaction of the crew just caused her to sigh in resigned acceptance, having realized that questioning the crazy things her captain seems capable of is an act in futility. She smiled though, as she wouldn't change it for anything. Shishishi. Don't worry, Bisca. Once we hit the seas, I'll explain what I meant by that. It's something important and I want us to have absolute privacy, Luffy stated. His crew nodded in acceptance at their captain's words. After finishing their meeting, they each went about preparing themselves and their ship for their voyage. They cut the two Baroque's works agents loose, and they promptly jumped into the ocean to get as far away from the Blood Moon pirates as possible. Luffy just sweat dropped at their antics, wondering if they had a boat nearby before going about his business. After about 2 hours of preparation, they were ready to set off. They were all standing on the deck of their boat, facing the twin capes where Crocus stood. Thank you for all your help, Crocus-san. Riau expressed her gratitude, which was mirrored by Bisca. Shizuku just stared blankly at him. Hyuna, on the other hand, still hasn't forgiven him for his earlier antics and was glaring at him with her sword partially unsheathed. Crocus felt a nervous bead of sweat roll down his face at the murderous intent that was visible in her eye. See you later, Asen. The next time you see us... we will be the first crew since the Roger pirates that traveled the entire Grand Line, Luffy stated matter-of-factly. Crocus smiled at the boy's confidence. Laboon, make sure not to mess up that mark. I'll see you soon. The next time we fight, I will be the Pirate King, Luffy shouted to the large whale who howled in happiness at his remark. Luffy smiled at his new friend. Okay, crew. We're about to take our first step into the Grand Line... It's time we left our mark on this world. We are the children of chaos, the seeds of anarchy. We are the Blood Moon Pirates. Now let's turn this world on its head, Luffy ordered while pumping his fist in the air enthusiastically, getting loud cheers from his crew along with excited smirks. They were ready to take on whatever came their way. It's been a crazy few hours for the Blood Moon Pirates since they left the Twin Capes. They were introduced firsthand to the unpredictable nature of the Grand Line as their ship was rotated 180 degrees from its original position, and they encountered snow, rain, and sunshine in the space of a few minutes. Shizuku learned quickly that she needed to keep her eye on the ball if they were to stay on course. A few minutes of inattention could mean they were knocked completely off course. Even though her expression was usually blank with no hint of emotion, if one looked close enough, like Luffy did, you could see her body twitch in annoyance at these strange occurrences. The conditions settled down though, for the most part, in the last hour, and they were sailing comfortably. Luffy decided it was as good a time as any to explain things to his crew, so he called for a meeting in the war room. They were all assembled and looking eagerly at their captain, who was standing in front of them. Shizuku was attentive to her captain, but she also kept a sharp eye on their surroundings to spot any changes in the atmosphere. Okay, what I'm about to explain to you will be something very important for the latter half of our journey. It isn't really a must for the first half of the Grand Line, but this ability is something that is necessary to survive the second half of the Grand Line. I want us to get started on it immediately. It will put us ahead of other pirate crews and boost our abilities even further. Luffy started explaining, getting the full attention of his crew. The ability I'm referring to is called Haki. Hyuna parroted. Haki is a mysterious power that dwells within everyone in the world. Presence, fighting spirit, control. It is no different from the other senses normal humans have, but average humans don't even notice this power, or they may try to develop it their whole lives without success. Luffy clarified. The girls were all paying rapt attention to his words, although they did sweat drop at the fact that he seemed to have put on a pair of spectacles and had a pointer in his hand that he was using to point to the words on a blackboard. That wasn't there when they came into the room behind him. They decided that they were better off not knowing. Removing all doubt, that is strength, he finished. The girls looked thoughtful at those words. They were skilled fighters themselves and could therefore appreciate the wisdom behind those words. Haki is typically divided into two shades. The power to be sensitive to your opponent's presence. This is Kenbenshoku no Haki. Everything on this planet, from humans, animals, trees, plants, and even certain inanimate objects, emits a voice. Being sensitive to this voice is the basis of Kenbenshoku Haki. If mastered, this power can give you the ability to discern both the location and the number of enemies outside your field of vision. By hearing the voice of your surroundings and reading the auras, one can judge the strength and even the intentions of people, similar to what I did earlier with those two agents. It even allows you to predict what the enemy will do in the next moment if used correctly. By listening for your opponent's voice, you would be able to anticipate their attack and evade. Of course, you have to be fast enough to react to the information you receive. The girls were looking visibly impressed and were almost vibrating with excitement at the prospect of wielding such an amazing ability. Even the usually subdued Shizuku. I would demonstrate this ability, but I don't really need to as you've already seen me do it, Luffy prompted, causing Riau to perk up in remembrance. The training session we had after we got the new ship. You sat blindfolded on the ground and had Shizuku swing a wooden sword at you from behind. Riau answered with wide eyes. Comprehension dawned on the faces of the other girls. Very good, Ray, Luffy praised, causing the girl to sit up a little straighter and have a gleam of pride in her eyes. The other girls looked a little annoyed that she was praised, but decided not to say anything for now. That's right. That was one of the most basic applications of Kenbenshoku Haki. There are more, of course, but we will leave that up until you actually awaken it. The group training I've been having you do every day is the most straightforward way for one to awaken their Haki. Kenbenshoku is the easiest form of Haki to awaken. As such, it will be the one we will try to focus on. Of course, you shouldn't be disheartened if you don't awaken it for a long time. It's not an easy power to unlock. It took me about 2 years to awaken mine, but I was much younger. You girls are a lot stronger and more prepared than I was back then. Of course, there are instances where it could awaken in moments of great stress or even in battle, so don't give up and keep up training every day, Luffy explained before finishing with a firm order that had the girls nodding in acceptance. Next up is Busashoku no Haki. This is also a very important skill and something that will become a necessity later on. The way it works, as best as I can explain, is like putting on a coat of armor around a selected part of your body, depending on your skill with it, to increase your attack or defense. Stronger armor will obviously mean stronger defense. With enough training, it allows you to imbue weapons like swords or projectiles to strengthen attack power. That really got the attention of all the girls, as they visibly perked up. The prospect of stronger attacks and dealing greater damage intrigued them. Even Shizuku was almost salivating at the thought of causing more damage. Luffy's sweat dropped at the violent personalities of his crew. One of the most important applications of Busashoku Haki is its ability to bypass devil fruit defenses. Like we saw with Smoker in Logtown, certain devil fruits make the user invulnerable to physical attacks. Loja-class devil fruits are especially relevant in this case, unless you have a Kairoski weapon or know the individual weakness of the fruit. The only way to hurt a user of a Loja devil fruit, like myself, is through the use of Busashoku Haki, Luffy explained. He removed his coat and slipped off his gloves. That got a few raised eyebrows as he was completely topless in front of them. Riau wasn't even shy about it and was shamelessly ogling his body. Bisca was giggling perversely to herself as she eyed his rock-hard abs. Kuina had a deep blush on her face as she tried to avert her eyes, but couldn't resist the temptation to look out of the corner of her eyes. Shizuku had no visible reaction whatsoever. At least that's what they thought. If one looked close enough, they would see a light dusting of pink on her cheeks as well as the strange gleam that came to her eyes as she started unflinchingly at her captain's body. Luffy noticed their strange reactions and had a question mark over his head. He wondered whether they were all a little under the weather, but decided to chalk it down to one of his crew's many quirks. The girls' sweat dropped at his clueless expression. It was endearing in its own way though, as their powerful captain showed that he wasn't as flawless as they seemed to think. Luffy held out his arm, and 4 sets of eyes watched in interest as it visibly blackened. Armament. The more practical application of Busashoku Haki that explained about earlier. You can increase attack and defense of your body and weapons with this, Luffy explained before putting his clothes back on. much to the disappointment of the girls who were enjoying the eye candy. Kenbenshoku, Busashoku. These are two types of haki. However, a select few people in the world can utilize another kind of haki. The power to control your opponent, Heishoku no haki. Many people who have made a name for themselves in this world possess this power hidden within them. However, while the color of the conqueror can be controlled, it cannot be trained. It is the very spirit of the user. The only way to strengthen it is to strengthen one's own mental strength. In terms of application, a proficient user of this ability could overpower the will of those weaker and effectively knock them out. It is especially useful when dealing with fodder you want to knock out quickly. It isn't unheard of for entire armies to fall in the face of this power. The stronger your will, the less this type of haki will affect you. It is said that only 1 in a million people are born with this power. The crew were awestruck that a power so fearsome actually existed in this world. Suddenly, Kuina's eyes widened in recognition. Back in Shell's town, at Morgan's base, he ordered his soldiers to kill themselves. When it looked like they were about to carry out the order ... you looked at them and this wave of power spread out. I can remember feeling it on my skin. It was overwhelming. In the next moment, all those soldiers fell to the ground, unconscious. Kuina whispered to herself, but it was loud and clear to the rest in the room. She looked up from her contemplation with a look of reverence at her captain. That's right. That was Heishoku haki. I am what those in the second half of the Grand Line would call an awakened conqueror. Luffy answered. The rest of his crew caught up quickly and directed looks of awe and admiration at him. He honestly was getting a little embarrassed at the attention they were paying him, if the bashful expression on his face was anything to go by. This just reaffirmed to the girls that they definitely made the right choice in following their captain. Who knows, one of you may possess the ability as well, he suggested. Anyway, that's all I had to say about that. Keep up your training and of course, I will be joining in as well from now on. It never hurts to keep up your training. Luffy finished, before dismissing the girls who went about their own business, different thoughts plaguing their minds about the information that they just received. Land ho! Bisca shouted from the crow's nest as the silhouette of an island became visible. Shizuku, what island is this? Luffy questioned his navigator. Whiskey Peak, she answered. It was a strange-looking island that looked to be one large grouping of cacti. Luffy picked up just over 100 different signatures on the island. They were all relatively strong. Not enough to pose a threat to any one of his crew members, but definitely stronger than the average civilian. They also seemed to be hiding some malicious intentions towards his crew. Luffy forwarded his findings to his crew, who all made a note to remain vigilant of their surroundings. As the mist cleared and they pulled up into the bay, loud cheers could be heard. The scene they witnessed was of a large number of people hugging the coastline, cheering their arrival. Fireworks were going off in the background and posters were waving in their direction. These people were strangely exuberant to be welcoming pirates. The strange behavior along with their captain's warnings immediately put the girls on edge. They did well to hide it though. There was no reason to show their hand early. Luffy just smirked in anticipation. Once they disembarked, they were met by a large blonde man with a strangely layered and curled hairdo. Welcome, Mama Mea. Welcome, my name is Igarappoi. I am the mayor of Whiskey Peak. This is the town of spirit brewing and lively music, Whiskey Peak. We take pride in our hospitality. We have an entire ocean of spirits for your enjoyment. Would you care to join us in celebration and share stories of your adventures? We would be Mama Mea. We would be delighted to hear them. The mayor, Igarappoi, said with a welcoming smile. Luffy's mind immediately put the pieces together concerning what was really happening here. It was made even more apparent when he spotted Mr. Nine and Miss Wednesday in the faces among the crowd. He looked to his crew and realized that they too figured the ploy of these people. Luffy signaled them with his eyes, telling them to go along with it. He had a mischievous smirk on his face, one that had his crew bubbling with excitement, knowing that their captain was the best at causing chaos. Luffy graciously accepted the invitation of Igarappoi, much to the cheers of the citizens. What followed was what can be described as a party of the ages. There was music and dancing. The citizens of Whiskey Peak went out of their way to create a party atmosphere for the Blood Moon Pirates, who partied up. Shizuku and Luffy ate enough food to feed a small colony. They didn't even look full as they kept putting more food away, much to the nervousness of the onlookers. Kuina, Riau and Bisca weren't letting up either. They were joyfully gulping down alcohol by the barrel. They didn't look the least bit inebriated. Igarappoi, who was watching on with a large-framed nun, Mr. Nine and Miss Wednesday, could feel a drop of sweat nervously slide down the side of his face. This wasn't how he expected things to go. They would run out of supplies soon, which was why it came as a relief to him when the pirates slowly passed out one after the other. It should have raised a few flags at how suspicious it seemed, but he was far too relieved to take note of it. As night fell ... the town descended to an eerie silence. There was a hint of danger in the air that would put most people on edge. They've finally tired themselves out and fallen asleep. Igarappoi stated as he glanced at the moonlight from outside the building that contained the Blood Moon Pirates. Good work, Igarappoi. Or should I say Mr. 8? Mr. 9 said from his perch atop a building opposite Mr. 8, with Miss Wednesday right beside him. Mr. 9 and Miss Wednesday were quick to get back to Whiskey Peak after being cut loose by Luffy and wasted no time in telling the rest of the incoming pirates. What of them? Miss Wednesday asked. They have fallen, Mr. 8 replied before turning around and looking at them with a cold expression on his face. Into hell, that is. Honestly, they were a stubborn bunch, the large-framed nun said as she joined the trio. We had to keep putting more and more sedatives in their food and drink. We wasted a lot of our supplies on just 5 people. We barely have any food left to last the next few days, she complained as she pulled off her habit, revealing her coarse pink hair that was pulled into 2 small ponytails along with her muscular frame. Still, was it really necessary to put on that drama? For 5 measly kids, we should have finished them off at the harbor. Even without them plowing through our supplies, we had a food shortage to worry about. She questioned Mr. 8 before pointing to Mr. 9 and Miss Wednesday. Especially since these two can't seem to deal with a single old man to bring back that whale meat. You don't have to say it like that. Mr. 9 sputtered indignantly. Compose yourselves, Mr. 8 ordered. Look at this. I've been doing some research on them, he said before revealing the 5 bounty posters of the Blood Moon Pirates. What? His 3 companions yelled in shock when they saw the bounties. Those 5 kids, the former nun shouted rhetorically. Those 5 kids just entered the Grand Line. We were there. How the hell did they rake up such high bounties already? Mr. 9 screamed in confusions. It is foolish to judge a pirate's abilities by their appearance alone. Miss This Monday, whoever those 5 are the world government has seen fit to mark them with exceptionally high starting bounties. They are clearly some kind of threat as it normally takes a while for rookies to get that high. The total amount is 219 million billy for the entire crew. It is unprecedented, Mr. 8 lectured. I am ashamed. The nun, Miss Monday muttered embarrassedly. But now that they've been disposed of, we can make a favorable report to the boss. We'll take all the valuables off their boat immediately. That, along with the money we get from their bounties, will win us a lot of goodwill from the boss, Mr. 8 said. And what about them? What will we do? Miss Monday asked. If we kill them, we lose 30% of the bounty. The world government enjoys its public executions after all, Mr. 8 answered. We need to keep them drugged and harmless until we turn them over. The trio of agents were about to carry out the order when a bone-chilling tingle ran down their spines. The atmosphere around them seemed to switch in an instant. There was a subtle edge of killing intent flooding the air. If that wasn't enough the hairs on the back of their neck stood on end as a voice that was both melodic and at the same time as unyielding as steel whispered through the wind. Hey, sorry to interrupt you little conference, but I'd appreciate it if you kept your hands off our ship. It would be a real chore to have to wash off all that blood if we have to dispose of you ingrates, Hyuna advised in a deceptively calm tone as Wadu Ikamanji glinted dangerously in the moonlight from her perch at the top of a building. The 4 agents were frozen in shock at the appearance of the swordswoman. Their eyes were bulging and their backs were stiff at the dangerous look that was in her eye. This Monday, Mr. 8, one of the grunts stumbled out, a long slash going down his body which was leaking a lot of blood, before he was cut off with his head flying off his shoulders from a powerful kick. The head, which was frozen in an expression of horror, slowly rolled to the feet of the 4 agents who felt an intense amount of fear at what was happening. Ryuju was calmly leaning against the building that Kyuna was perched on. They looked to the side to see Shizuku, with a large plate that was filled with meat, calmly sitting and eating. What was disconcerting about the scene was the blood that was on her clothes. They didn't see any sign of Bisca, but the sound of a gunshot echoed through the air, coming from the direction of the ship. Finally, Luffy was sitting on the ledge of a building with his legs dangling off, watching proceedings with an amused smile on his face. Wah! Mr. 8 exclaimed in shock and terror. This wasn't how their plan was supposed to play out. You all should have been completely unconscious, he shouted hysterically. The 4 of them were soon joined by the rest of the bounty hunters in opposition of their new foes. None of them looked to have much confidence though. HMPH. No true swordswoman, no matter the circumstances, would allow herself to be overwhelmed by alcohol. Hyuna replied. As a poison expert, I can honestly say I'm a little insulted by your paltry effort to drug us, Ryuju commented. The fearful agents looked to Shizuku, wondering how she overcame their attempts. She stopped eating for a minute before staring blankly at them. Badass, she stated, causing them to face fault. Shishishi ... You certainly are, Shizuku, Luffy praised jovially. But man, you guys sure do suck at what you do. I honestly almost fell asleep waiting for you guys to make me fall asleep ... if that makes any sense. Luffy mocked. Oh, and if you're wondering where Bisca is ... she's currently perched on the crow's nest of my ship, sniping any targets that have the balls to get close to my vessel. But this is quite the nest of bounty hunters here, Sencho. It seems as though they deceive merry pirates just as they enter the Grand Line ... then take them for all they're worth. Hyuna remarked, it would be impressive ... if there weren't more than 100 bounty hunters here, clearly showing quantity over quality. They probably overwhelmed their opponents with numbers. It's a bit of a sloppy operation if you ask me. But then again ... you can't expect much else from a third-rate criminal organization. Isn't that right? Baroque works. The agents tensed up even more at that comment. They didn't understand what was happening. They had done this numerous times before. The result was always the same. This time it was only a crew of 5. The smallest number yet. It should have been a walk in the park. So why did it feel like they were the ones being hunted? How ... do you know that name? Mr. 8 stuttered out. HMPH ... back when I was still in this line of work, your organization sent a scout to try and recruit me. Of course we had a difference of opinions. I refused to join a silly little organization like this one, and he was in too many different pieces to give a coherent answer. Hyuna replied with a chilling smile. Luffy had to stop himself from chuckling out loud when he saw how much fun his first mate was having. She really was great at being a villain. Oh well ... he wasn't any better in that regard, so it was a bit of a match made in heaven. Come to think of it ... the rest of his crew also seems to have a natural predisposition to being bad guys. Something to ponder on later. The members know nothing about each other and call each other by code names. And of course, the boss identity and location are a mystery even to the members. An organization that ... PFFT ... faithfully carries out its orders. Baroque works. Was it supposed to be some kind of secret? Honestly, we made you guys the moment Bevis and Butthead over there let their codenames slip. About 3 seconds after meeting us, Hyuna taunted as she pointed towards Mr. 9 and Miss Wednesday, who were both trembling at the glares they were receiving from the rest of the bounty hunters. Since you know our little secret ... we have no choice but to eliminate you. Mr. 8 threatened with false bravado. There was absolute silence for a moment. The bounty hunters assumed that the Blood Moon pirates were now fearful of their situation since they could finally comprehend it. But they were proven dead wrong the next moment as the silence was broken. PFFFT. Luffy roared out in laughter, slapping the roof as he tried to control himself. It didn't help that Ryuju and Kyuna were also struggling with their laughter as they joined in their captain's amusement. Even the normally indifferent Shizuku was letting out dry chuckles at their expense. It may have been their imagination ... but they could have sworn they heard the high-pitched laughter of a woman coming from the bay. The bounty hunters could feel their faces heat up with embarrassment. This was one of the most humiliating experiences of their lives. The same prey they were supposed to be hunting ... were standing before them wholly unconcerned and had the nerve to laugh in their faces. They were about to charge with their weapons ... when the laughter abruptly stopped. There was silence as the 4 pirates lost the mirth from their faces and stared coldly at them. Just as Mr. 8 was about to address the rest of the bounty hunters in the hopes of boosting morale and eliminating the increasingly dangerous threat before them ... he tensed as his body was racked with fear. The air was suddenly flooded with an overwhelming killing intent. The eyes of the 4 pirates were razor sharp. The atmosphere was thick with an intense bloodlust ... so much so that the bounty hunters could almost taste the blood in the air. Many of them were seeing visions of their deaths ... from decapitation to brutal evisceration at the hands of these bloodthirsty pirates. Some of the weaker bounty hunters couldn't handle the situation and plunged their blades into their hearts, deciding that it was a more merciful death than what their supposed prey would afford them ... They were right. Their fellow bounty hunters didn't even bat an eyelash at the numerous suicides happening right beside them. Not out of apathy ... but because they were too frozen in fear to react. The 4 numbered agents were feeling the consequences of their actions catching up to them fast. It was too late for them to have realized that they may have bitten off more than they could chew. As the tension reached its height, Luffy spoke calmly to his crew. Go wild, he ordered simply, much to the joy of his girls. Those 2 words cut through the bounty hunters like a death sentence. The bloodthirsty grins in the faces of Kyuna and Ryuju as well as the sadistic gleam in Shizuku's eyes spelt nothing but pain for them. Kyuna jumped off the building she was perched on, landing right in the center of a group of bounty hunters. Ryuju pushed off the wall she was leaning against and walked a few meters before coming to a stop in front of another group of bounty hunters. Shizuku didn't move from her spot and went back to enjoying her feast. Luffy sat on his perch, a drink in hand as he eagerly looked on, excited to see the show his girls were going to put on. The bounty hunters were trembling in their presence. Some portion of their brain, a really small one, was screaming at them that they were in the presence of greater predators. They ignored it though. The natural fight or flight instincts of their species were flaring powerfully. Common sense would dictate that they tuck their tails between their legs and run. But fear and pride were warring inside them, overriding their common sense. In the end, their small-minded pride won out and they rushed to their deaths. Well, Hyuna started, grinning maliciously at her prey. her sword gripped delicately in her palm. Let's get this show in the road. In a flash, the bounty hunter in the front of the line was bisected in half. It only took a fraction of a second. All they managed to perceive was a glint of metal before two halves of their comrade dropped to the floor with his blood spraying all over them. They froze in shock at the brutal scene. Unfortunately for them, a few seconds of gawking was all that their opponent needed to punish them. Wadu Ikamanji sung beautifully through the air as Kuina slashed at the defenseless bounty hunters. It was like she was performing a beautiful dance, beautiful but deadly. She moved gracefully around the incoming bounty hunters, cutting them down like common cattle. Heads were sent flying, limbs were lopped off, and men were disemboweled. Blood was raining down from Kuina's ruthless dance. Her opponents realized too late just how far out of their depth they were. There were thoughts of running. Unfortunately for them, Kuina wasn't in a forgiving mood. The scent of blood hung thickly in the air and she locked onto it, like a bloodhound. She would hunt her prey and put them down like the animals they were to her. She was swift and vicious in her swordplay. Her sharp, cold blue eyes were penetrating the very souls of the men surrounding her. It was the last sight they saw before suffering a horrific and painful death. Riau was having a ball with the group she had taken. Her quick feet and powerful legs were far too much for the run-of-the-mill bounty hunters. Her concussive kicks caved in chests and tore off a few heads with their ferocity. Screams of pain and anguish were ringing out through the air from the ruthless punishment Riau was inflicting upon them. If her monstrous kicks weren't enough, she showed them why they called her the Black Widow, as she wielded two small poison-tipped daggers in her hand, occasionally slipping it between people's ribs before kicking them away, letting her fast-acting poison eat away at them. Tears were flowing down the eyes of the onrushing hunters as they realized that there was no escape for them. They had picked the wrong side. They had bitten off more than they could chew. The storm of kicks currently tearing them apart was their karmic justice, it would seem. Shizuku didn't immediately attack anyone. She just sat calmly, eating from her large plate. The bounty hunters that were surrounding her, hearing the screams of their comrades, lost all sense of reason and charged her. Shizuku's normally blank eyes sharpened immediately as she swallowed the last piece of meat from the large bone she was holding before using said bone as a club and bashed the incoming hunter's skull in. The sound of his skull cracking and the sight of his brain matter splattering all over the floor would be a sight that would make most people lose their appetites. But Shizuku, while holding her new bone club, grabbed another large piece of meat and started heartily biting into it. The frozen horde of hunters didn't even get time to vomit from the sick sight as Shizuku descended upon them, crushing skulls and piercing their unprotected bodies with her bone club. She was absolutely relentless in her attack, her face never once showing a flicker of emotion and her eyes never leaving her delicious-looking meal as she brutalized her would-be hunters. For those bounty hunters who were actually coherent enough to recognize the danger they were in and run for the hills, they were unfortunately reminded, for the short time that they were still alive, that there were actually 5 members to this crew. Holes appeared in the middle of their foreheads as bullets from miles away seared its way through their skulls. Her aim was impeccable and her speed was inescapable. Bounty hunters were dropping like flies as Bisca sniped them with ruthless efficiency. There was no escape. The 4 numbered agents could only look on in horror at the scene they were forced to bear witness to. It was pure carnage. Blood ran like a river through the streets and body parts were decorating the surroundings as the Blood Moon pirates tore through their opposition with brutal efficiency. Fear, pure, unadulterated fear was what they could feel coursing through their bodies. Miss Wednesday didn't seem to be able to withstand the sight and collapsed to her knees, vomiting. Mr. 8 looked at her in concern before refocusing his gaze at the massacre that was occurring before them. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. It was supposed to be an easy job. Now he was facing his death along with his charge. All their work going down the drain. He had no idea how to escape this hell they were in. Silence. It permeated the air. It was unnatural, especially in a town as lively as Whiskey Peak. The screams of anguish have stopped. The sound of a blade slicing through human flesh couldn't be heard any longer. The sound of heads hitting the pavement abated. Gunshots could no longer be heard ringing through the air. The quiet was suffocating. The tension still hung in the air like a bad rash. Mr. 9 and Miss Monday were far too hot-headed to remain calm under such terrifying circumstances. They rushed towards where most of the carnage had happened, their common sense being overridden by whatever force was driving them. They didn't get very far though as 2 blue bolts of lightning honed in on them before electrocuting them to a crisp. Miss Wednesday was on the verge of having a nervous breakdown at the scene of violence she had just witnessed. Mr. 8 wasn't any better as his entire body was trembling with fear. The silence was broken by the sound of footsteps. The clacking of high heels on the concrete pavement echoed throughout the silent town as Kuina and Riau leisurely strolled towards their captain. They both took inhuman leaps and landed silently on the roof of the building Luffy was sitting on. They eagerly took a seat next to him as he offered them a drink after their hard work. Shizuku was comfortably perched at her table, resuming her feast without care for the dead bodies littering her surroundings. Thanks for the free booze, assholes, Luffy taunted playfully from his perch. The last two agents were quivering in terror. They had no idea what to do in this situation. Mr. 8 thought about revealing their identities and begging for mercy. His pride was a small price to pay to save the life of his charge. But he spotted the unluckies, an otter and vulture pair of agents that reported directly to the boss of Baroque Works. He knew that revealing such information here would end really badly for him. He was stuck between a rock and a hard place. He didn't know what to do. Unfortunately for him, the decision was taken out of his hand. Looks like you guys had a party that was to die for. A playful feminine voice rang out. HMPH ... to lose to a single pirate crew. Pathetic. A deeper masculine voice scoffed. When Mr. 8 looked towards the voices, he saw a tall man with dark skin and black sunglasses. He was wearing a brown high-collared coat with a pink scarf. He had spiky-looking dreadlocks on his head. Next to him was a slim-looking woman. She wore a short yellow dress that was decorated with lemons along with white high heels on her feet. On her head was a yellow cap over her blonde hair, and she carried an open yellow and blue striped umbrella in her hand, which she was twirling around. Mr. 5, Miss Valentine. Mr. 8 gasped in shock at their appearance. He thought he could salvage something with the appearance of the higher-ranking agents here. Are you here to help us? He asked hopefully. Do you honestly think that we would come all the way to the beginning of the Grand Line just to help you with your simple mission? Miss Valentine questioned in a mocking tone of voice. There are criminals here that merit the boss dispatching us directly, Mr. 5 said, causing Miss Wednesday and Mr. 8 to tense up. The boss' exact word were, "Someone knows my secret." Just what that secret is, of course, even I don't know. But our organization's primary directive is secrecy. Therefore, we do not tolerate any investigation into the identity of our members. And if someone were to learn of the boss' secret, naturally, they would have to be eliminated. So, we thoroughly investigated which persons could have found out the boss' secret. Ha ha ha. And what a surprise. We discovered that important members of a certain kingdom had infiltrated Baroque Works. Miss Valentine said. The infiltrator is none other than the Kingdom of Alabasta's currently missing captain of the Alabasta Royal Guard, Igaram, and Princess Nefertari Vivi. By order of the boss of Baroque Works, you are to be eliminated. Mr. 5's declaration rang out like a gunshot in the silence of Whiskey Peak. The newly identified Igaram stood protectively in form of the fearful Princess Vivi, formerly Miss Wednesday. The two Alabastons were currently filled with dread. Their cover had been blown. They were now sitting ducks here in this ghost town. There was no escape for them. Even if he wanted to fight, he didn't know if he could hold them off long enough for Vivi to escape. He needed to protect the princess. The silence stretched on for a while longer as the agents of Baroque Works stared at the former agents. The silence didn't last though. Ho, would you look at that, girls? Turns out the slutty stripper lookalike is actually a crown princess. The amused voice of Luffy rang out through the silence, catching the attention of the 4 Baroque Works agents, both present and former. They had completely forgotten about the Blood Moon pirates, which was hard to believe considering the carnage they wrought on the island. Luffy just chalked it up to the bad guys losing all awareness of their surroundings while delivering the standard cheesy villain monologue. Vivi's face flushed in mortification and Igaram looked indignant at the crude remarks made about the princess. Stay out of the way, pirates. This is Baroque Works business. If you insist on sticking your nose in ... you will be eliminated, Mr. 5 warned threateningly. It seems as though we're being threatened by some sad night fever reject. Riau mocked. Whatever will we do, Captain? Mr. 5 had a tick mark on his head at her remark and Luffy snickered to himself. Well ... we were originally planning on eliminating these Baroque Work bounty hunters. I don't see any reason to stray from that path. The guy with the stupidly curly hair and the slutty princess don't seem to be working for the organization ... so we'll leave them be ... for now, Luffy remarked. Hyuna, Riau. These two newcomers totally killed the mood and ruined our fun. Teach them a lesson, he ordered. Fufufu ... Hii, Sencho. Hyuna replied giddily. You got it, Captain, Riau responded. They both jumped from the building with Hyuna standing before Mr. 5 and Riau standing before Miss Valentine. Why are you helping us? Igaram probed furiously. Even though he was thankful for the reprieve, his shaking knees gave away the absolute fear he felt when facing Luffy. Luffy just looked at him indifferently for a moment before smirking. What's life without a little whimsy? He answered casually. Whatever reply Igaram or Vivi might have had was cut off by the confrontation between the 4 fighters not too far away. Ha ha ... So you pirates decided to stick your nose in the business of Baroque Works instead of running with your tail between your legs. You obviously aren't that smart, Miss Valentine taunted. Mr. 5 beside her was busy picking his nose. Hyuna and Riau just looked at her with half-lidded eyes, clearly conveying the contempt they felt for her. Suddenly, both pirates disappeared before Miss Valentine's cry was heard as she went sailing through the air courtesy of a vicious roundhouse kick from Riau. Mr. Five grunted in pain as he skidded back from the explosion that originated from his original position, a large gash on his chest from having been slashed by Kuina. The explosion engulfed the swordswoman upon making contact with the agent. HMPH. Physical attacks are useless against someone like me. I can make any part of my body explode. I'm a bombman. Using the ability of the Bamu no Mai, I have never failed to complete a mission, Mr. Five explained as he tried to stem the blood from his chest, thinking that he had taken Kuina out with the explosion. Oh, that's interesting. Thanks for explaining your ability to me, Kuina replied with a bland tone as she stared at Mr. Five from her position. The edges of her battle kimono were lightly singed, but no overall damage was present. Wah, he exclaimed in surprise. He didn't get to dwell on his surprise for long as Kuina came charging at him. He hastily picked his nose before flinging a booger in her direction. Nose fancy cannon. Kuina scrunched her face in disgust before dexterously sidestepping the attack, which exploded upon impact with the pavement. Some of the debris hit Kuina in the back, but she ignored the pain and jumped into the air before rotating 360 degrees and slashing at Mr. Five, who was trying to put another booger but was too late. Moon Flash, a diagonal cut, to go along with the horizontal one he already had, opened up on his chest and spurt blood as he cringed in pain. The effect of his devil fruit kicked in though as they were both engulfed by an explosion. Kuina had enough wherewithal to swiftly backtrack after her initial cut, mitigating the effects of the explosion on her. It did open up more distance though and give Mr. Five more room to work with. It was a disadvantage for Kuina to fight an opponent that she couldn't get up close and personal with. She had to stick and move. Being around him for a long stretch of time would be dangerous. Nose fancy, triple cannon. Out of the smoke the explosion kicked up. 3 more boogers came flying at her. She used her fancy footwork to hastily dodge, barely escaping the radius of the explosions. She could have easily cut them, but there was no way in hell she was going to cut up some guy's disgusting nose junk with her beautiful sword. She was being pushed back, and she didn't like it at all. When the smoke cleared, she got a clear view of Mr. Five. He was still struggling a bit from the 2 slashes she landed on him. She needed to work that into her advantage. This would have been simpler if she had a long-range attack in her arsenal. Something to think about later. She jumped from her position and planted her feet on the wall of an adjacent building. She started running on the wall, parallel to the ground, dodging explosions that were sent her way by her opponent. It was annoying that he seemed to never run out of ammunition. Being a bombman, though, gave him all the ammunition he needed. She also hypothesized that it gave him a certain resistance to physical attacks. Those 2 times she cut him, those were enough to put most men out of commission, but he seemed to be doing fine for the most part, bar a little discomfort. Kuina felt grin on her face. These are the kind of opponents she wanted to face, not the fodder of East Blue. She kicked off the wall, taking a powerful sideward leap and bringing her sword down in a stabbing motion. Mr. Five was slow to react to Kuina's superior speed and was late in getting out of the way. He managed to avoid being impaled in a fatal area, but couldn't stop the sword from piercing his foot. Kuina hastily retracted her sword and back-flipped away, just in time for Mr. Five to explode. His scream of agony was heard through the explosion as he grabbed his bleeding foot and hopped around in a circle, hoping to stem the pain. Unfortunately for him, Kuina smelt the blood in the water. She swiftly ran at him, building up a bit of momentum. Wadu Ikemonji held at her side. As she got into range, the surprise of the face of Mr. Five was thrilling for her. He had completely taken his eye off the ball. He tried to pull out what looked like a pistol, but it was too late. She sped past him with surprising velocity, her sword being brought down with purpose as she landed in a crouch. Idoryu, Daishinkan. Mr. Five chest exploded in a shower of blood. His mouth opened in a silent scream. An explosion engulfed him once again. When the smoke cleared, he was lying face down on the ground, unmoving, his body almost cut in half. Kuina let out a breath. She took a while to collect herself before straightening up. She flicked the blood of her sword before sheathing it at her side. She silently walked away, her gait elegant and victorious. Miss Valentine slowly picked herself out of the building she was sent crashing into. She wasn't feeling too good right now, but it seemed as though her opponent was a little trigger happy. She finally managed to pull herself out as she walked towards her opponent. She came to a stop in front of a sophisticated-looking Riau, whose arms were crossed under her large bust. Miss Valentine had a tick mark on her forehead at the fact that this bitch was so nonchalant about the fact that she just kicked her into a building. "Oh, you're back. You're a lot tougher than I gave you credit for," Riau commented indifferently, the compliment not sounding sincere at all. Miss Valentine twirled her umbrella in agitation. She wanted to attack, but stayed her hand. Her ability worked best when her enemy came to her. Riau, never one to sit back, kicked off the ground and blurred towards her opponent. She unleashed a swift roundhouse kick towards Miss Valentine ... only to hit fresh air. Ha ha ha. An annoyingly obnoxious laugh came from above. Riau looked up to see Miss Valentine floating in the air. How do you like my ability? I ate the kilo no mai. I can change my weight at will. Miss Valentine boasted. You know I can see your panties from down here. Ryuju deadpanned. Miss Valentine flushed in embarrassment and hastily tried to cover herself up. Seriously though, strawberry panties. What are you, 5? Ryuju mocked. Miss Valentine's face flushed with embarrassment and anger. 10-0 kilo press, she shouted before coming barreling down from the sky directly at Ryuju. The speed of the descent caught the cook off guard and she had to hastily skid away to avoid direct damage. She coughed up a little from the dust that was kicked up before running forward and snapping out a thrust kick towards where Miss Valentine landed. The kick caught the agent in the face as she was climbing out of the hole in the ground she made, causing her to fly back. Miss Valentine took to the air once again, an angry scowl on her face and a line of blood leaking out of the corner of her mouth. I'm going to enjoy crushing the life out of you. She seethed at Ryuju, who just arched an eyebrow at her in amusement. 10-0 kilo press, Miss Valentine shouted as she came barreling down from the sky once again. Ryuju skillfully dodged this time, keeping a close eye on Miss Valentine's speed and trajectory, causing the agent to puncture the concrete once again. This time though, Ryuju didn't make any move to attack. If anything, she relaxed her body. Miss Valentine climbed out of the hole, looking at Ryuju warily, wondering why she didn't take the opportunity to attack like the last time. She put it out of her mind and took to the sky once again. She smirked at Ryuju, thinking she gave up on the offensive. 10-0 kilo press, Miss Valentine came crashing down towards Ryuju once again. But this time, Ryuju swiftly jumped into the air, catching Miss Valentine off guard. It was too late to change her trajectory though. Ryuju got above Miss Valentine and calculated just the right angle to attack. She unleashed a helicopter axe kick to the back of Miss Valentine's head in the split second she had. The effect added to the momentum of Miss Valentine's descent but made her lose control of her motion. Her own power was her worst enemy in this case as her increased body weight was used against her, sending her crashing painfully into the ground. When the dust cleared, her body was lying in a hole in the ground. She wouldn't be getting up anytime soon. Ryuju softly landed in a crouch before standing up to her full height. She didn't even spare Miss Valentine a glance as she walked with poise towards her captain. The first mate and cook of the Blood Moon Pirates met up halfway and walked towards Luffy, who was sitting on the table Shizuku was eating at. He had a proud smile on his face as he took in their forms. Excellent work you two, he praised, causing them to stand a little straighter at their captain's praise. He offered them both a drink to quench their thirst from the battle. Shizuku raised a drumstick at them in congratulations. They noticed a strange-looking brown fruit with swirly designs at his side. What is that? Hyuna inquired. Shishishi. Think of it as a spoil of war, Luffy answered mischievously. Yo, good work everyone. Bisca cheered as she joined her crew. They all sat around relaxing after their long day of fighting and party. They were interrupted by the clearing of a throat nearby. They looked to the side to see Igaram and Princess Vivi. I wanted to thank you for saving us ... even though you didn't have to. Vivi timidly spoke. Igaram looked like he wanted to say something, but he kept his mouth shut out of respect for the princess. Like I said before ... it was just a whim of mine. Think nothing of it, Luffy replied. Vivi stared at him for a second, before her eyes seemed to suddenly be filled resolve, like she steeled herself for something. She got down to her knees and prostrated herself before the Blood Moon Pirates. I know I have no right to ask this of you, but please, I beg of you. My country is in serious trouble. The leader of Baroque Works is propagating a civil war and thousands of my people are going to die if I can't stop them. Please lend me your aid. We don't have much money, but we will compensate you in any way you desire. Vivi begged. Igaram had tears in his eyes as he saw his princess throw away her pride for the sake of her country. All emotion melted off Luffy's face as he stared blankly at the prostrated form of the princess. The rest of his crew watched on with interest, surprised at the lengths the princess would go. There was a glimmer of respect in their eyes as they looked at her. Let me make something clear to you, princess. We are not a bunch of heroes. You have seen that firsthand. What makes you think we would help you? Luffy questioned, his eyes drilling a hole into her. Strangely though, when she lifted her head, there was no fear on her face. She just smiled at Luffy. I can tell that you are not bad people. Maybe a little mischievous and rowdy bunch, but you are all good people. It's a gut feeling, I guess. Plus, at this point, I have nothing else to lose. I can only trust my instincts and hope that they were right. Five answered with a bright smile on her face. Luffy looked expressionlessly at her for a few minutes, her eyes never leaving his and her bright smile never once slipping. After a few minutes of the stare down, Luffy let out a tired sigh before a small resigned smile appeared in his face. He wanted to curse himself, but he couldn't. No matter how badass he tried to portray himself ... he was an absolute sucker when it came to strong women. There was something about the resolve-filled eyes of a woman who was willing to sacrifice it all for her loved ones that melted the ice around his heart. It was his greatest weakness. You win, princess, Luffy said with a tired smile on his face. Vivi lit up in joy at hearing his response. The Blood Moon Pirates will aid you in this endeavor, but we certainly expect to be compensated, he added, trying to save some face. But the girls around him, his crew plus Princess Vivi, just giggled at him, clearly seeing through his facade. He flushed a little in embarrassment before laughing along with them. He invited Vivi and Igaram to have a drink with them while they explained the details of what was going on. They had an interesting path ahead of them. Okay, let me see if we got this right. You, Nefertari Vivi, Crown Princess of Alabasta, infiltrated the criminal organization, Baroque Works, to uncover the nefarious plot that has been put in place by its leader, a man by the name of Mr. Zero. Luffy recited carefully as the Blood Moon Pirates sat around the table that Shizuku claimed as her own just outside the main building of Whiskey Peak not far from where their ship was anchored. Luffy had tentatively agreed to help the princess, after which she had proceeded to outline the bare bones of the plan she had started. Vivi nodded at Luffy's explanation so far. And you worked your way up the ranks, doing goodness knows what, Luffy added, before giving her a look. Vivi flushed in embarrassment before vigorously shaking her head negatively. She wasn't that kind of girl. You eventually uncovered the identity of the big boss man, which is a crime punishable by death in Baroque Works, and in turn he found out who you really are and now he wants to silence you. Once again, Vivi nodded affirmatively. Wow, I must say I'm impressed. I just thought you were a slutty princess. Turns out you've got some seriously big balls on you, Luffy commented with an impressed look on his face. His girls were chuckling to themselves as Vivi's face lit up in embarrassment at the backhanded compliment as well as the language being used, while Igaram looked outraged. You scoundrel, how dare you speak to the princess in such a crude manner? Show some respect, Igaram bellowed, his face red and contorted in indignation. Luffy just gave him a pleasant smile in return, but the bloodlust he was radiating was telling Igaram that he better sit the fuck down and keep his mouth shut. The older man, who was smart enough to recognize the signs of danger, wisely decided to keep his opinions to himself. I've got to agree with the boss. It's pretty damn impressive for you to have the courage to do what you're doing, Haim. But, as a former Marine, I've got to ask, why didn't you just go to them for help? Your position as royalty certainly has a lot of sway with the world government. That could have easily solved your problem, Bisca pointed out. The others perked up at this as well, now that Bisca pointed out the obvious solution. Now that you mentioned it, why on earth would you ask a bunch of bloodthirsty pirates for help instead of the world government? Riau questioned with narrowed eyes. She just casually referred to us as bloodthirsty without even batting an eyelash, Bisca whispered to herself in dejection. Vivi shifted uncomfortably at the stares she was receiving from the crew, unsure as to how to proceed. That has to do with the identity of Mr. Zero, Vivi stuttered out carefully. As she looked at the crew, all she received were expectant looks from them, making her sweat nervously. Well, out with it, Hyuna prompted with a stern-looking face. Yeah, I'm curious now. Who's this mysterious leader? Luffy asked excitedly. He was always up for solving a mystery. Vivi, in response, shook her head emphatically and waved her arms in protest. I can't tell you that. If you found out, he would hunt you down as well, she protested vehemently. I couldn't possibly tell you that he is one of the Shichibukai, crocodile, she finished. The silence that permeated the air was stifling. Crickets could be heard chirping. Vivi looked at the completely deadpan faces of the Blood Moon Pirates and she adopted a look of horror as she realized what she had just said. What an airhead, Riau jibed. Well, she had to have some kind of character flaw, Hyuna added. Apart from dressing up slutty and doing weird dances, Bisca chimed in. Stupid, Shizuku threw in her comment. Each one pierced Vivi like an arrow, causing her to hang her head in shame and mortification. Shishishi, I think she's funny, Luffy said, laughing heartily at the princess's slip-up. Vivi just buried her face in her hands, hoping to escape the embarrassment. They all heard a squawking sound coming from a nearby rooftop. They turned to the sound and spotted a large vulture and a strangely dressed otter, holding up impressively done sketches of the Blood Moon Pirates. Vivi adopted a look of horror as she spotted them, knowing what was going to happen. That's a pretty weird sight, Luffy commented as he gazed at the animals. And we've seen some pretty strange things thus far, Bisca added, impressed by the sketches they were able to make. The otter jumped on the vulture's back and took off. Stop them, Vivi shouted frantically, drawing the attention of the crew to her. That's Mr. 13 and Miss Friday, also known as the Unluckies. They report directly to the boss. If he gets our pictures, Baroque's works agents will be actively hunting us down, she warned, fear creeping into her voice. Hey, it might be fun to take them all on. Oh well, I don't really care either way, Luffy said as a blue lightning bolt dropped from the sky, electrocuting to the Unluckies. After about 10 seconds of being fried by the bolt, they dropped to the ground, dead, their corpses still smoking. Well, I guess I know what's for dinner tonight. Can you cook an otter, Ray? Luffy commented before turning to his cook. She scoffed at his question. Please don't insult my skills, Captain. That vulture is nothing but an overgrown chicken and otter meat is supposedly as tender as veal. By the time I'm done with them, you will be salivating for a bite. Riau replied with a confident smirk. Luffy looked at her with stars in his eyes. Shizuku, too, had a shine to her hungry, gleaming eyes at the thought of the feast they would have tonight. Vivi looked ill at the thought of eating the unluckies. Sure, they were animals, but they were a lot smarter than most. Not to mention, she used to work with them. It was hard for her to separate the two. She decided that it was best not to question the antics of the Blood Moon pirates as it may save her a lot of headaches and nausea in the future. So our opponent will be one of the Shichibukai? Huh, that's some pretty good luck on our part. Luffy pondered out loud. Fufufu. I have to agree, Sencho. He has an entire criminal organization under his command, and I'm sure he has some pretty strong subordinates as well. There will be enough fun for all of us, Kuina said with a bloodthirsty smirk on her face. Ha, look at you, getting all excited to spill some blood. You need to learn some restraint, Kuina. But I agree. At least I know that things could never be boring around our captain. Riau commented with a sly smile on her face. Tashigi, Vivi look absolutely stupefied at their reactions. Instead of being afraid, they look absolutely ecstatic at the thought of fighting one of the Shichibukai. Even if she was a bit of a sheltered princess, even she knew that a normal person wasn't supposed to react like that. Why do you people look so excited? Crocodile is an extremely dangerous man. The numbered agents he has are all dangerous devil fruit users as well. There's a good chance that we will die going against him. Vivi shouted. There was silence for a moment before the sounds of laughter filled the small clearing. Luffy was laughing his ass off. Kuina and Riau were chuckling along as well. Even Shizuku had something that could be passed off as an amused smirk on her face. Bisca was the only one that wasn't laughing, and that's because she was busy trying to stem the headache she was getting from being around a bunch of fucking lunatics. Die, Tashigi. You're funny, stripper princess. There's no way we would lose to a flaky bastard like Crocodile. I mean, can you see how badass my crew is? He exclaimed as his hand swept towards the girls in his crew, each exuding an aura of pure confidence. Doesn't matter who that bastard has under his thumb. My girls and I will kick his ass all over the Grand Line. That's not a maybe. That's a motherfucking fact. The confidence in his eyes and voice as he said that was almost palpable. The girls in his crew all sat up a little straighter. This is why they followed Luffy. His unbending determination as his overwhelming charisma was something that just drew you in. And before you knew it, it was too late. But they wouldn't have it any other way. Vivi too felt her back straighten at his words. She was brave enough to admit that she was afraid. Not afraid of death though. She was afraid that she would fail her people. Until this point, she knew that she barely had a smidgen of a chance at succeeding. The odds were so heavily against her that she had almost resigned herself to be doomed to failure. But now, with these odd bunch of pirates, things had changed. They gave her something that she had thought she had lost a long time ago. A feeling called hope. She could feel that sweet sensation of hope blossoming in her chest as she watched the antics of the Blood Moon pirates. They were all so strong, so confident, and so fearless. They were everything she herself wished she could be. They didn't even flinch in the face of danger. If anything, they welcomed it with open arms. She started to believe that maybe with them on her side she could finally free her country. Boss, you said you were going to explain that weird brown fruit you've got there. Bisca said, breaking Vivi out of her thoughts as she focused on the rest of the group. I'm glad you asked, my dear Bisca, Luffy said, trying and failing to be suave, bringing him nothing but giggles from the girls, Vivi included. This, my friends, is one of the mystical and powerful devil fruits, he said, as he dramatically pointed at the fruit. The girls leaned in with interest as they inspected it. It was the first time any of them had seen a real one. More specifically, this is the Bamu no Mai that respawned here after Kuina off that weirdo that liked to play with his boogers. Ho, do they really work like that? Riau inquired interestedly. Yup. When you kill a devil fruit user, their fruit respawns in the world into a fruit that is closest to its base. In this case, the Bamu no Mai has a pear as its base fruit, hence it respawned in the nearest pear. Luffy supplemented, getting nods of understanding from the girls. So what are we going to do with it? Kuina asked. Well, do any of you girls want to eat it? He asked curiously. I'll pass, Bisca said. Me too, Kuina added. Not interested, Riau answered. Tastes ugly, Shizuku responded. Well, I kind of expected that. What about you, Haim? You want it? He offered a surprised Vivi. Said girl was a little bewildered but quickly shook her head negatively. There is the option of selling it ... but the only people likely to buy it are enemy pirate crews or the Marines. I don't much feel like strengthening our enemies. I suppose we can keep it in storage until we figure out what to do with it. Maybe a future crew member will want to eat it. Luffy shrugged. He was about to give out some orders, but was forced to choke on his saliva at the most horrifying sight he had ever seen in his young life. Vivi-sama, fear not mama, because I have a plan. Igaram proclaimed. It wouldn't have been a problem if it wasn't for the fact that he was decked out in the same outfit that earned Vivi the nickname Slutty Princess from Luffy. The grotesque sight of the skimpy outfit stretched across Igaram's large body made Luffy's stomach churn as he fought to keep the contents of his stomach down. Igaram, what on earth? Vivi proclaimed as she saw her bodyguard, having lost track of him when she started talking to the Blood Moon pirates. That's fucking disgusting, Luffy exclaimed, his face turning an ugly shade of green. I agree, Riau said with a look of disgust on her face. There are some things in this world that are not meant to be seen, Bisca said with a horrified lilt in her voice. Repulsive, Shizuku chimed in emotionlessly. It makes me want to cut him up into little pieces, Hyuna said with a haunted look as she slowly unsheathed Wado Ikemanji. Vivi-sama, please listen carefully, Igaram said, addressing his princess, ignoring the tears flowing down his eyes at the merciless comments of the pirates. Even though the unluckies are out of the equation, Baroque Works will eventually receive the report about you and who you really are. And once they learn that we are the ones that know the boss' true identity, you understand what will happen, don't you? As many as 1,000 hunters could soon be coming after us, she replied. Luffy and Hyuna perked up at hearing that. Being the battle maniacs that they are, the prospect of fighting off 1,000 hunters was something that made their blood boil with excitement. That is why I have dressed in the manner of the princess. I will depart with these 3 decoys ... and travel on a straight course for Alabasta, he announced. Once they have begun pursuing me, Vivi-sama and the rest of you can safely depart for Alabasta. You don't really have to do that. If those guys come after us ... then we'll just eliminate them. Easy as pie, Luffy commented. The casual way that he spoke about eliminating thousands of bounty hunters sent a chill down Vivi and Igaram's spine, not just at the casual disregard for life, but to the fact that they knew that he and his crew could do it. After all, they had a front row seat to the kind of brutality that the Blood Moon pirates can perpetuate. There's no end need for that. I'm sure that why you could, but that would just slow you down from getting to Crocodile, Igaram argued, sweating profusely at the thought of the princess being exposed to more violence like what they had witnessed earlier. Well, if you're intent on going through with this little plan of yours, then we won't stop you. Luffy shrugged unconcernedly, causing Igaram to release a breath of relief. Now, princess, hand me the eternal pose, he prompted, causing Vivi to hand over an hourglass with the word alabaster inscribed at the bottom. He turned to address the crew. Now, even though I've never done it before, there should only be 2 or 3 stops before you get to Alabaster. I will leave the princess in your care, he informed them, before turning back to Vivi. The journey may be dangerous, so please be careful. Hurry back to Alabaster, princess. I will be waiting. There was a moment of silence between the two as they communicated everything that they needed to through their eyes. Vivi looked like she wanted to protest his decision, but Igaram was resolute. With a final nod, he boarded the small sailing boat and set off. She watched him go off with a small smile. His boat had just reached the horizon when the unthinkable happened. Boom! A violent explosion ripped through the area that his boat had occupied. The sea was littered with flames and pieces of driftwood as the devastating results of the attack became apparent. Igaram, Vivi shouted in despair, tears rolling down her eyes. She tried to go to him, but Luffy grabbed her around the waist and her in place. Let go of me. I have to help him, she shouted in protest, becoming hysterical. Luffy just spun her around and pulled her into a warm embrace, her head resting on his chest as he gently stroked her hair. That was all that Vivi could take as she broke down, sobbing uncontrollably into his chest. Luffy allowed her to get it all off her chest. Knowing that she wasn't just crying for Igaram but also for all the pain she has had to endure, that she locked away for the sake of her self-appointed mission. The others were quiet as Luffy comforted her, knowing that this was a sensitive time. After her sobs became sniffles, Luffy addressed her. Are you sufficiently calm now? Luffy asked gently. She let out a little sniffle before nodding. Good, because that cross-dressing pervert is still alive, he told her. Vivi's head shot up like a rocket and her eyes were wide with disbelief. He could see the question in her eyes and gave her a little smirk. I have a special ability that allows me to sense people. I can still sense him. He's a little disorientated, but very much alive. So you don't have to worry. Just have faith that he can take care of himself and do your part just as he would want you to. Vivi teared up once again, only instead of sadness and despair, this time it was in happiness and gratitude. Thank you, thank you, thank you, she repeated as she buried her face in Luffy's chest. At this point, the sensitivity wore off and the girls were getting annoyed at the princess molesting their captain. The killing intent they were giving off was pretty impressive that it actually made Luffy sweat a little. Vivi was completely ignorant to it though, being oblivious to those kind of things. You really are a strange group of pirates, she said as she finally let go of Luffy and wiped her tears away before giving him a bright smile. Shishishi, thanks for the compliment, he replied. Normally she would have sweat dropped at Luffy taking something like that as a compliment, but now she just giggled at his silly behavior. Okay girls, let's gather up the supplies here and head out. he ordered. The girls obediently carried out his orders, emptying the island of their food supply and taking whatever money and weapons they could find. Wait, I need to find Karu, Vivi exclaimed in a panic. Karu? Ryuji asked quizzically. Karu is my friend. He's a spot-billed duck, she said as she looked around frantically. You mean that guy? Bisca was as she pointed to their ship, where a yellow spot-billed duck with a blue helmet and a saddle was waving at them, seemingly having been there for a long time. You were there the whole time, Vivi shouted with sharp teeth. Just as they were finishing uploading their supplies on, Shizuku walked towards them dragging something behind her. As the crew got a closer look at what she was dragging, their sweat dropped. She had the leg of Miss Valentine in her hand as she was dragging the semi-conscious body of the girl behind her with an emotionless look on her face, with the girl's face continuously bouncing off the cobble road. Luffy felt a bead of sweat roll down the side of his face. Hey, Shizuku, what do you have there? He asked tentatively. Present, master, she said as she lifted Miss Valentine by the same leg as she held her upside down, like an animal carcass being displayed by a hunter with a look of satisfaction in her eyes. Luffy just face-palmed at her antics. Hey, that bimbo is still alive. I thought you killed her, Ray. Bisca pondered dubiously as she looked towards Ryuji, who was lightly scratching her head. Well, I certainly hit her hard enough to kill her. She's sturdier than I gave her credit for. Ryuji replied with a shrug. What should we do with her, Sencho? Should I silence her forever? Hyuna asked as she menacingly unsheathed her katana. Luffy's sweating just increased at that, compounded by the fact that the rest of the girls looked to be on board with that idea. While he was no stranger to killing, he didn't condone the killing of a clearly defenseless enemy. He wasn't an immoral. His girls were far too bloodthirsty sometimes. They were crazier than he was ... and that was a frightening thought. These girls are going to be the death of me, he screamed in his mind. Calm down. Just slap some Kairoski handcuffs on her and throw her in one of the cells below the deck. We'll figure out what to do with her later, he ordered, getting a pout in response from Hyuna at not being able to kill the girl. Vivi watched the scene with a morbid fascination. The way they so casually spoke about killing was something that both disgusted her and fascinated her at the same time. It was like watching a train wreck. No matter how hard you tried, you just couldn't look away. The way the girls looked put out that they couldn't kill Miss Valentine made her wonder whether she would be okay with this clearly mentally unstable group of pirates. I'm scared, she whispered to herself. Me too, Luffy replied piteously from beside her, making her jump in shock. As she tried to get her heart under control, Luffy started belting out orders. Okay, that's enough fun. Hyuna, help Bisca finish loading the supplies. Shizuku, plot our course. Ray, I could go with something to drink. Vivi deadpanned at that last order. How does a cool banana milkshake sound? She asked. You're the best, Ray. Luffy praised with a thumbs up. Ryuji just smirked superiorly at the other girls, making them fume silently. Vivi watched this display and once again questioned herself whether it was going to be okay following these weirdos. Once everything was packed and ready, they set sail. The Artemis smoothly gliding across the water as they casually lounged across the deck. It was quite early in the morning and there was a cool fog hanging in the air. It's a good thing you were able to shake off your pursuers. A melodic voice carried through the air. You should watch out for the shallows so that you don't strike the hull. The crew plus Vivi looked up to see a woman in skimpy cowgirl outfit casually sitting on the upper railing of their ship. She had lightly tanned skin, blue eyes and shoulder-length straight black hair. Vivi, though, recognized the woman and her face turned to one of fear. Who the fuck are you? Bisca yelled as she pointed her finger at the mysterious woman. Miss All Sunday, Vivi shouted in fear. The woman gave an indulgent smile at Vivi. Miss Wednesday, I saw Mr. 8 not too long ago. Miss All Sunday commented airily. You, Vivi seethed silently as she glared at Miss All Sunday with hatred. While she would have normally raged at the woman, she managed to remain composed for the most part thanks to Luffy already telling her that Igaram was fine. It didn't mean that she felt any less anger at the woman. Miss All Sunday looked around the ship to see Hyuna still casually leaning against the railing. Ryuji was sitting on a chair, enjoying the banana milkshake she prepared. Shizuku was sitting in front of an easel, painting something. They were completely disregarding her presence. She wasn't sure whether to feel impressed or annoyed. Normally she got some kind of reaction out of people. She looked towards the captain to see him staring intensely at her. She shrugged it off at first, but the longer it went on the more uncomfortable she was becoming. She was starting to wonder if this man had recognized her. Sencho, what's wrong? Hyuna asked when she saw her captain staring intently at the women. She drew the attention of the rest of the crew who also looked on curiously at what he was doing. Luffy took his eyes off Miss All Sunday and turned his serious expression towards Hyuna. No, I was just wondering if all the girls on the Grand Line are this scantily clad, he answered with an expression of genuine intrigue on his face. The girls couldn't hold back their snickers at the serious face he was making while asking such an off-topic question. It was simply adorable to them. Despite her cool and unflappable demeanor, Miss All Sunday almost face-planted at hearing that. Here she was wondering if her identity was uncovered and he was actually focused on what she was wearing. What prompted this sudden thought? Riau questioned with an amused smile. Well, think about it. Vivi was dressed like a stripper when we first met her. Then there was that cosplaying nun. Then there was the partner of that booger guy. She was wearing the tiniest dress I've ever seen in my life. She didn't even need to jump in the air for us to see her strawberry panties. And now there's a weirdo in a slutty cowgirl costume sitting on the railing of our ship. Luffy explained earnestly before pointing to Miss All Sunday as he finished. Miss All Sunday had a tick mark on her forehead at being called a weirdo. It was like the pot calling the kettle black. Vivi buried her face in her hands at being reminded of her, as Luffy put it, stripper attire. The girls on the other hand were highly amused at their captain's observation. He could be surprisingly innocent at times. It also didn't escape their notice that their uninvited guest was getting a little worked up by Luffy's comments as well as the fact that they were ignoring her. Don't think about it too much, Captain. I'm sure we'll come across some conservatively dressed woman soon, Riau said. Hey, why the hell would I want that? I'm a 17-year-old boy in the midst of puberty, you know. I mean, can you see how sexy that cowgirl is? Luffy exclaimed. There were deadpan stares directed at him as his crew withdrew their previous thoughts about his innocence. Miss All Sunday didn't even know how to react to that. Sure, it was flattering. And Luffy was a handsome man, of that there was no doubt. But he, along with his crew, seemed so far off the deep end it wasn't even funny. Our captain's strange fetish for skimpily dressed cowgirls aside, Hyuna started with a stony look on her face, causing Luffy to crouch in the corner of the ship with a rain cloud over his head as he drew circles in the ground with his finger. You called her Miss All Sunday, right? Well, whose partner is she? Mr. Zero, Vivi replied, never taking her eyes off Miss All Sunday, who once again looked amusedly at her. She's the only one allowed to know the boss' true identity. We shadowed her in order to find out who he really was, or to be more precise, I'll let you shadow me, Miss All Sunday interjected. I knew that. And then the one who informed the boss of his exposed identity was you, wasn't it? Vivi demanded. Miss All Sunday just closed her eyes and chuckled softly. Correct. Just what exactly are your intentions? Vivi thundered. Who knows? But you were so serious about it. I just had to cooperate. A princess who actually thinks that she can make enemies of Baroque works and save her country ... It's just so ridiculous, Miss All Sunday said. The rage on Vivi's face was almost palpable. What an unpleasant woman, Riau commented. I already hate this bitch, Bisca spat. Sencho called her sexy. She needs to die, Hyuna said with a murderous look in her eyes. Eliminate cosplay pervert, Shizuku added with a slightly maniacal look in her eyes. Miss All Sunday started sweating lightly at the killing intent directed at her and murderous looks in the eyes of the female members of the crew. Oi oi, calm down girls, Luffy placated with a sweat drop. He really needed to be careful with his words in the future. His girls could be surprisingly possessive at times. He was starting to wonder if being stuck on a boat with 4 very powerful and hormonal women was a good idea. It seemed like it at the time ... Now though, he was wondering whether he would survive this journey. His crew looked at him strangely when they saw the waterfall of tears roll down his face as Luffy contemplated his life choices. Those unpleasant thoughts aside, you can relax a little. I'm not here on any orders, so I have no reason to fight you, Miss All Sunday said. Suddenly Luffy ended his little comedy skit and straightened his posture. His body language radiated authority, and his mesmerizing purple eyes were drilling a hole into Miss All Sunday, seemingly stripping away all the barriers she put up and peering into her very soul. The change was so sudden that Miss All Sunday was honestly caught off guard. She got so caught up in their pace that she had completely forgot how dangerous these pirates were supposed to be. Looking at the captain now, the once silly goofball was gone. In his place stood a man with the commanding presence of a king. She felt a bead of sweat on her face as she came to understand just why the world government put such a high bounty on his head. This was no normal rookie. He was something dangerous. It wasn't just him either. The 4 members of his crew snapped to attention when their captain's authoritative presence filled their ship. They knew the time for games was over. Their captain meant business. Miss All Sunday was starting to question the wisdom of her decision to invade their ship tight now. It was a seemingly good idea when she thought of it. But as she sat there and faced down the Blood Moon pirates ... It didn't seem like the most intelligent decision anymore. There's no need to be so hostile. I simply came to observe that man who caused such an uproar amongst the Marines. Fufu ... So you are the infamous Monkey D. Luffy, she said with a cavalier look as she tried to cover up the nervousness she was feeling as Luffy never took his unnerving stare off her. After staring at her for a little while, Luffy gave her a knowing smirk, something that set her on edge. That's me. I'm a little flattered that someone as famous as you came all this way for little old me, Luffy said with a large smile on his face as he never took his eyes off her. This all Sunday felt her back went rigid at his words. She now had no doubt that he knew exactly who she was. He didn't seem to have any hostility in his eyes though, which confused her a little. His eyes showed nothing but curiosity. It was just a little stop on my way. You have really bad luck though. You picked up a princess that Baroque works once dead, and that princess being protected by such a small number of pirates. But your worst luck of all ... is the route that Log Pose is leading you on. Luffy quirked an eyebrow at her, wondering where she was going with this. The name of the next island is Little Garden, she said ominously. The Blood Moon pirates looked around at each other, wondering if they were supposed to be afraid or something. My dears, even if we did nothing to stop you, you won't make it to Alabaster. You will be annihilated, rushing towards a place where you will die. Doesn't that sound awfully foolish? It sure does, Luffy agreed. This all Sunday gave him an approving smile before throwing what looked like an eternal pose at him, which he deftly caught. With this, you can avoid Little Garden. This needle points to Nanamani Island just short of Alabasta. Since none of our members know this route, you will not be followed, she said with an indulgent smile. Vivi looked shocked at the offer on the table. The girls on the crew didn't react much, for they simply didn't care. They would follow only what their captain ordered. The sound of glass shattering and hitting the ground could be heard as all eyes moved to Luffy, who crushed the eternal pose on his hand while never taking his intense eyes of Miss All Sunday. Vivi looked on in horror, and even Miss All Sunday looked a little incredulous at this turn of events. The rest of the crew, though, just smirked, having expected something like this. As you said, it's a foolish thing to do. Unfortunately for you, those are the kinds of fools we are, Luffy said with a smirk. I'm the captain of this ship. As such, I decide the route we take. It doesn't matter what danger awaits us or how badly outmatched you think we are, because in the end ... we will win. It was said not as a possibility, but as a fact, pure and undisputable. The amount of conviction in his words made Miss All Sunday widen her eyes in surprise and a little apprehension. She had never met a man like this before. It doesn't matter how many hunters you throw at us. It doesn't matter how many of your numbered agents will stand in our way. It doesn't matter how strong you think your boss is, because once is all said and done, we will make sure Vivi succeeds, and Crocodile will be lying in a pool of his own blood, defeated. The only question is ... how much time he has until that eventuality and whether or not you will be joining him. Vivi held her hands to her mouth as tears started to leak out of the corner of her eyes, even though she was ready to follow the path she chose to the very end. Until this point, there was still a bit of lingering doubt in the deepest recesses of her mind, but now, listening to Luffy proclaim the absolute guarantee of their success ... she felt her doubts crumble away. She felt her resolve renewed, and she felt her confidence rise. He was right. She ... and oh ... they would do it. She wasn't alone now. She had found her place among this small and strange crew. Never before had she felt more belonging than when she was with them. She would not disappoint them, not when Luffy had placed his confidence in her. Failure was not an option. Miss All Sunday could honestly say that she felt a little fear. The strength of Luffy's conviction and his unbendable willpower blew away any doubts she may have had about the validity of his claims. She couldn't help but think back to another D that had impacted her life. He was much the same, so confident and resolute ... even in the face of death. He never backed down. She wondered what it was with them. Was there something special about that initial? She didn't know, but she was curious. Along with the fear she felt came a bit of excitement. She wanted to see more. She wanted to watch this man. She wanted to see the kind of impact he would have on this world. Hyuna, Shizuku, Bisca, and Riau all had smirks on their face at hearing their captain's words. They never expected anything different. That was the kind of man he was. That was the man they had decided to follow. They were never once afraid. Not of Baroque works and not of Crocodile. Their captain was with them. He placed his confidence in them and their power. That meant that they would succeed, for failure was never an option. They would carry out his orders and ensure that he is victorious. They were his sword and his shield. They would remove whatever little obstacles were in his way and make sure that he reached his objective. In this case, it was Crocodile. They would deal with those numbered agents and clear the path for their captain to go on and eradicate Crocodile. The inevitability of that was already set in motion. Crocodile was living on borrowed times. I see. It seems nothing I will say can change your mind, she said as she got off the railing and walked to the side of the shit. Let us meet again, Monkey D. Luffy. With that said, she jumped off the edge and landed on a giant turtle with a riding straddle strapped to it. Without a word, it started swimming off. The Blood Moon pirates just watched her leave, having no interest in stopping her. It took the gang a surprisingly short amount of time to reach Little Garden, much of which was spent relaxing on their deck, soaking up the sun. The weather, for the most part, seemed to have calmed in the last few days and paved way for beautifully bright sunny days. There were lots of ice cream being eaten and bonding being done. The crew got to know Vivi a little better and came to understand and respect the depth of her love for her country. They realized that Little Garden was on the horizon when an abnormally large dolphin sailed over their ship. It was the size of a large whale. They didn't know what kind of island Little Garden was, but they were smart enough to realize that there was something odd about it. As they docked in a river mouth on the edge of the island, there were enormous trees and littering the island. It looked like an adventurer's paradise. There was so much natural beauty on offer that the island could be thought of as an untamed jungle. Unsurprisingly, there didn't seem to be any human settlements on the island. "Okay, crew, listen up," Luffy announced as their ship dropped anchor. "We don't know what kind of dangers this is'll." He was cut off as he turned to see the biggest bird he has ever seen in his life descend towards their ship, intent on plucking one of them for lunch. Things didn't go his way though, as Shizuku jumped into the air and nailed him with a punch that sent him rocketing to the other side of the island. After landing on her feet, she made a show of dusting her hands off, getting a small applause from the rest of the girls. "Like I was saying, we don't know what kind of dangers this island possesses. Evidently though, it is larger than average wildlife. So be careful of any hidden dangers and tread carefully," Luffy warned. "With that in mind, Ray, make me a pirate lunchbox. I'm going exploring," he exclaimed, getting deadpan looks from the rest of them. Hi, Riau said before getting to work. Is it okay if I come with you, Luffy-san?" Vivi asked timidly. Luffy looked at he in a little surprise before giving her a smile and a thumbs up. "Sure you can, Vivi. This might actually be a good opportunity to fill up our pantry. If the animals on this island are all the size of that dolphin we came across or that bird ... we can stock up on enough to last months," Hyuna pointed out. "So you mean we should go hunting?" "Oh, how interesting. I'm definitely game," Bisca said. "Shishishi. Good luck, girls. Bring us back something good." Luffy cheered them on. Upon getting his validation of their chosen activity, the two of them locked eyes for a moment before a look of rivalry passed through them. "I will impress Boss divided by Sencho with the biggest trophy," they both thought competitively. "Are you coming as well, Shizuku?" Luffy asked his navigator. She looked at him blankly for a few seconds, before nodding in acceptance. "Okay, here you go. 5 pirate lunchboxes. I'll stay here and watch the ship. Just make sure you guys don't go and do anything stupid," Riau said, causing Luffy to innocently tilt his head and point to himself. "Especially you," she shouted. With that said, they all took off. Hyuna and Bisca raced off in different directions, intent of finding the best game to hunt. Luffy, Vivi, and Shizuku took off at a leisurely pace as they scoped the place out. They were getting deeper into the jungle when Vivi stopped on the bank of the river they were passing. "Is this what I think it is?" she asked in shock as she held up a strange shell-like life form. "Ammonite," Shizuku clarified. "These are supposed to be extinct." "What kind of island is this?" Vivi shouted in shock. "A prehistoric one," Luffy calmly pointed out, nodding his head sagely. "How do you know that?" Vivi asked hysterically. "Well, there's a brontosaurus over there." Luffy laughed sheepishly as he rubbed the back of his head, pointing towards a towering brontosaurus. Vivi's eyes widened in shock and horror at the sight. "Cool," Shizuku commented with sparkles in her eyes. "Oi, look over here." Luffy waved his arms as he tried to herd the dinosaur's attention. "What the hell are you doing?" Vivi shouted with shark teeth as she smacked him in the back of the head. "Hey, I thought it would be fun to have a little fight with him. Plus ... it looks like it would taste really good," Luffy argued with a pout. Shizuku's back straightened when she heard that, a small trail of drool escaping the corner of her mouth and a glazed look in her eyes. "Master is a genius," she whispered deliriously before charging at the brontosaurus and clocking it in one of its tree trunk-sized legs, causing it to howl in pain. She kept on attacking with alarming ferocity, but the brontosaurus was built like a tank and was surprisingly able to take a lot of abuse. Looks like Shizuku smells blood in the water. I actually feel a bit sorry for the big guy. Drawing Shizuku's attention is never a good thing," Luffy lamented with a look of pity directed at the dinosaur. Vivi rubbed her forehead in annoyance, hoping to stem some of the headache from hanging around the Blood Moon pirates. As Shizuku continued her furious assault, the brontosaurus that she was attacking had its head lopped off cleanly. Shizuku froze in place, her body starting to tremble lightly. There was silence for a moment before strange laughter filled the air. Jaya, the biggest man any of them have ever seen, entered the clearing, carrying a sword with remnants of the dinosaur's blood on it along with a shield. He also wore worn leather armor. "You're a funny bunch of humans. I saw you guys playing with the long necks," he heartily commented. "Whoa, you sure are big, awesome," Luffy commented as he shielded his eyes with his hand in an effort to get a better look at the guy. Vivi was terrified out of her mind at the sight of a giant. Shizuku, though, was glaring daggers at the man. If looks could kill, he would be a giant pile of smoldering ash right now. "Jaya, I am Elbaf's mightiest warrior, Dory," he shouted. "Oh, Monkey D. Luffy, future pirate king. Nice to meet you." Luffy introduced himself with a casual wave of his hand. Vivi looked at him in shock at his casual dismissal of the dangerous situation they were in right now. "Pirate, that's great. Jaya, come, let me show you to my place," Dory said as he picked all 3 of them up and carried them off. Nay, are we being kidnapped right now? Vivi asked gloomily. Tashigi, don't sweat the small stuff, Vivi, Luffy told her with a hearty slap to the back. He looked over to Shizuku and sweat dropped. She never once took her murderous gaze of the giant. She was clearly upset that he stole her lunch that she was so looking forward to. Jia, this pirate lunchbox of yours is quite tasty, Dory said as he ate the lunch Ryuju prepared for Luffy. They were currently situated in Dory home, inside a large cave. Tashigi, of course it is. My cook prepared it after all. If you had said any different I would have kicked your ass, Luffy said cheerfully. Vivi wanted to be shocked at the outrageous thing he said to a fucking giant of all things. But at this point she was just tired, which was why she was softly banging her head against the wall, hoping this nightmare would just end. Kick my ass, Dory said with a serious look on his face, causing the tension to rise slightly before he started laughing. Jia, what a funny little man. While this was going on, Shizuku was completely ignoring them as she was too busy in Fantasyland as she tore through the feast of dinosaur meat that Dory prepared for them. As soon as he presented them with the feast, all the anger she was feeling at him went away and she gave him a robotic thumbs up before digging in. The gang got on splendidly after that. Well, Luffy and Dory did. Vivi was still scared out of her mind and Shizuku didn't care for much beside the delicacy of dinosaur meat. Eventually though, a volcano went off in the middle of the island. Dory picked up his weapons and said that it was time to fight and that his new friends were welcome to watch. Luffy, Vivi and Shizuku watched as Dory fought another giant in a fierce battle that eventually ended in a draw. Dory eventually hobbled back to the cave. After calming down, Dory began to tell the story of himself and Bragi and their fight in an effort to settle their 100-year dispute according to the rules of Elba. It made Luffy's respect for them go up, but Vivi was horrified that people would fight to the death for such a thing, especially when Dory said that he forgot what they were fighting about. Mr. Dory, how long does it usually take a log pose to set on this island? Vivi asked with some trepidation. 1 year. The answer was immediate with absolutely no hesitation. Vivi's face morphed into of dismay. Well, that certainly is a problem, Luffy commented as he scratched his chin as thought. Luffy suddenly snapped his head to the right. The signatures he picked up as soon as they set foot on this island were suddenly giving off a very pleased vibe. Luffy wasn't really going to do anything about them, but considering that they have a criminal organization after them, he decided that it wouldn't hurt to check. Dory, can I leave my friends in your care? There are some ants scurrying around this island that I need to squash before they do anything stupid, Luffy asked the giant. Jia, sure thing my friend, he replied. Thank Dory, Luffy thanked before turning to Vivi and Shizuku. Girls, stay here while I go take care of this, he ordered. Is it Baroque works? Vivi questioned perceptively. I'm not sure yet, so I want to go check just in case. But at this point, I would be surprised if it wasn't, he told her honestly. An arc of blue lightning rocketed through the forest before stopping at a certain spot, congregating into the shape of a human. Luffy gazed from his spot perched on the branch of a tree, peering into a small clearing in the middle of the forest. There was a conspicuous-looking igloo sitting in the middle of the clearing. It looked to be made of some smooth, malleable substance that clearly wasn't ice. He felt the 2 signatures that he was looking for calmly sitting inside, unaware of the beast that was currently hunting them. They didn't feel particularly powerful to Luffy, but he decided not to take any chances. He walked up to the door of the igloo and kicked it open. Wah! A masculine voice shouted from inside. Who the hell are you? A man with a blue and white striped vest, blue pants and blue shaded sunglasses shouted. He had the strangest hairstyle Luffy had ever seen. It was in the shape of the number 3. That basically gave away his identity to Luffy, who looked at him like he was an idiot. There was a little girl with him as well. She had a blue and white check shirt and blue pants with a wide-brim red hat on her head covering her auburn hair that was done in 2 pigtails. I don't know what you think you're doing, but your luck has run out today. You just intruded on 2 agents of Baroque works. Prepare to die. Candle low. That was as far as the man got as Luffy appeared in his line of vision, introducing the man's face to his fist. Painfully, he went flying back into the wall of the igloo, crashing into it hard before slumping to the ground. Luffy looked to the little girl, who was sweating bullets at this point. He didn't feel like hitting a little girl, so he used a small burst of Heishoku Haki to knock her out. He walked over to the man he had punched, grabbed him by the hair and sat him back down at his previous position before taking a seat next to him. Now, judging from that stupid hairdo you've got going on there, I'm assuming you're Mr. 3, yes? Luffy questioned. I won't tell you anything, Mr. 3 said defiantly, though there was an undertone of fear in his face. Wham! Wrong answer, Luffy exclaimed as he grabbed Mr. 3 by the hair and slammed his head face first into the table they were sitting. So let me ask you again, even though I already know the answer. Are you Mr. 3? Luffy asked in a pleasantly menacing tone of voice as his killing intent flooded the air. Why yes, Mr. 3 stuttered out. He could feel his nose was likely broken and he wasn't looking forward to more of the treatment. Good answer. Next question. What are you doing on this island? Seeing the hesitation from Mr. 3 made Luffy sign in annoyance. He grabbed him by the hair once again, preparing to give him a little reminder as to why it's in his best interest to answer. Wait, Mr. 3 said anxiously. We came here to claim the bounties on those 2 giants. They have bounties of 100 million billy each. I thought the boss would be happy if I brought that much money in. He explained frantically. So you're saying that you didn't know we were on this island? That you have no orders to impede us? Luffy asked. I don't even know who you are, Mr. 3 exclaimed. Is that so? Luffy commented with a smirk on his face. That's good. You should be thankful, Mr. 3. If you were here on orders to get in my way, I would have had to kill you, Luffy said with a friendly smile that made Mr. 3 almost shit himself. As it is, you were just at the wrong place at the wrong time. Mr. 3 breathed out a small sigh of relief. That being said, your main base of operations is in Alabaster. So the question is, how are you planning on getting back? Luffy questioned as he wrapped his arm around Mr. 3's shoulders in a friendly gesture, but to Mr. 3, it felt like being in the constricting embrace of an anaconda. He felt a nervous bead of sweat roll down his face, recognizing that he had no choice in the matter here if he wanted to see tomorrow. There's an eternal pose in the briefcase over there, Mr. 3 said nervously, as he pointed to the side of a room where a black briefcase sat. Hey, that will be really helpful in the future. You're a good guy, Mr. 3. Luffy praised as he gave the man a hearty pat on the back. Said man let out a relieved chuckle as well, glad that he would be spared. He would have to find a way to get information about this man to the boss as soon as possible. He was far too dangerous to be left alive. He didn't get much time to think about anything else though as Luffy grabbed him by the back of the head and slammed down on the table with the same friendly smile on his face. Wham, G, WWHY, Mr. 3 asked pitifully. Wham, SSOP. Wham, oi, you still awake? Luffy asked as he cupped his ear and leaned down close to Mr. 3. There was no response. Wham, you can never be too sure, Luffy said to himself as he nodded sagely. He left Mr. 3 face down on the table and went over to the briefcase. He checked inside and found the eternal pose he was looking for. He pocketed it quickly along with the wad of cash that was rolled up in the briefcase. He looked around the place and spotted 2 den mushi. He held up his fingers in the pose of a gun and zapped the both of them with his lightning, rendering them useless. He couldn't have Mr. 3 contacting Crocodile anytime soon. Normally, he would have just killed the guy ... but seeing as though he was just here by coincidence, Luffy decided to leave him be. It was done on a whim. Besides, he had a little girl with him and Luffy wasn't up to killing her. If he left her alive and with the corpse of her partner in the middle of a prehistoric jungle ... that wasn't any better than death. He thought about taking them prisoner ... but he already had one and wasn't up to deal with the headache of feeding them all. So he decided to leave him here to the whim of fate. If he survived, then good for him. If he didn't, then ... it was no skin off Luffy's back. He left the igloo without a word, heading towards the direction of Dory to pick up Vivi and Shizuku. He hurriedly gathered them, bidding goodbye to his new giant friend before heading to the ship. He found Kuna and Bisca already back from their little hunting expedition. Kuna was displaying a huge triceratops and Bisca was showing off the T-Rex she bagged. Tashigi, good job girls ... but I think it's time to get off this island, he said, getting a confused look from Vivi. But Luffy-san, Mr. Dory said that it takes 1 year for the log pose to set on this island. She pointed out dejectedly. Well ... it's a good thing that I found this conveniently placed eternal pose to Alabaster then. Luffy replied with a mischievous grin as he held up the eternal pose for all to see. The happiness that bloomed on Vivi's face was warming to see. Not to mention infectious as they all hurriedly packed away all that they needed for them to set off. Everything ready, Luffy called out, getting affirmatives from his crew. Then let's set sail. As they were leaving the river mouth of Little Garden and re-entering the turbulent Grand Line waters, Bisca's sharp eyes noticed something. Hey Vivi, it looks like you were bitten by a bug. Are you going to be okay? She asked concernedly. Hi, it was probably just a mosquito or something, Vivi replied, before looking to the horizon. She couldn't wait to get back to her country and stop this pointless war. She would do everything in her power to stop Crocodile from making a mockery of her people. Okay, sadly the chapter is over. And if you enjoyed the video, just leave a like and subscribe with post notification. So when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.